Reference, I don't know who to talk
I
to.
was actually gonna text you about it. I was.
And then I can refer you to somebody? No, I'm joking. Gladly.
Okay, we're ready to go. All right, welcome everyone and council members. And we've already started this meeting. We just came out of executive session, and this is the regular meeting for March 4th, 2019. And with that, I think we are ready to go into announcements. So, any announcements from council members? Lisa?
I want to make an announcement about coming soon to a street near you. You may remember some time ago that Kevin Leidy began working with his 10th grade U.S. history course to do a banner project called The Struggle for Equality, the Experience of Women in U.S. History. And not only did his students research women who had an impact on history, but they were all women who made an impact on the village of Yellow Springs, or were born in or resided in Yellow Springs and made an impact nationally and worldwide. So our street is going to be probably this weekend, I think. Banners are going to go up, and we'll be able to learn more about all these women. And in addition, there's going to be a special edition in the newspaper that's written by the students. And Megan did work with and support the students in their journey along the way. So not only will we have these banners, but we'll all have an opportunity to read the research and learn more about these important women from Yellow Springs history. So I really want to thank Kevin Leidy and the students of his 10th grade U.S. history course, and also Patty Bates and also Johnny Burns, who are helping to facilitate getting everything up, because it's kind of an art show on our
Yeah.
street. So that's I hope you all enjoy it.
All right, thanks, Lisa. Any other announcements? I did want to mention A Sound of Music is coming to a theater near you. And I know that we've got some curtain warming activities this weekend, and it's the next 2 weekends. So, yeah, I'm sure everybody loves A Sound of Music as much. What's that?
We can go together.
Yes, we will go together.
The hills are alive.
So, and we always want to support our schools and all the great things they do. And I think that's all our announcements, huh? Wow. I feel like I just want to thank the village in general for something. But anyway, so it seems like we always thank somebody. All right, so we got the consent agenda. We've got the minutes from our last meeting, February 18th, as well as for our executive session on February 25th. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes,
So
or the
moved.
consent agenda?
So much.
Second. Sorry.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, and petitions and communications?
Yes, I'm looking for one, that's why I'm sort of,
Okay.
we had one for International Women's Day, but I don't have it. International Women's Day is this Friday. I know there is a gathering, but I don't have does anyone?
Was it Alice Basora organizing it?
I don't know. Maury Rothman was the person who sent out something about it. But I think probably if you look on Facebook or in the paper, maybe you'll find out about it. So, communications. There were 3 communications regarding an increase that Governor DeWine is placing on gas tax, which will go for infrastructure, infrastructure improvements, and the village actually will get some of that money eventually. So that, there was one from the Ohio Municipal League. Denise Swinger gave some information about what the village will see as an increase, and there was one from ODOT. Then there were several letters in support either of the Millworks PUD or the owners, the new owners of the Millworks PUD. One from Denise Duvernay, one from Lisa Walters and Nate Cornett of Yellow Spring Brewery, one from Ellen and Rod Hoover, and one from Gregory Dubai. Then the mayor had a proclamation report that she will be posting proclamations that she's not making in person outside this room, and if you go out, you can see them. There's a bulletin board in there to the left of that bulletin board. Let's see, Brian, you put something in there about preparing for the 2020 census.
That's right.
And it was mostly about the importance of why it's important to have people fill out the census reports, and it'll be able to be online, and they even have like little committees that encourage people to report. So you
And
get,
it turns out that Yellow Springs has been flagged as one
Yeah.
of the 5 communities in Greene County that doesn't do a good job with responding to the census. So,
For shame.
yes,
Wonder
so
why,
we need to work on that.
wonder why.
and, well, sometimes it's college student related, because I
Yes.
think they don't know where they're, it's not clear for them where they should be reporting. Lastly, I had an announcement, which is the Housing Advisory Board is sponsoring a community meeting on Thursday, March 14th. That is a week from this Thursday at 7 p.m. It involves transitory guest lodging establishments. The purpose of the meeting is because it is likely that council will recommend to Planning Commission that we tighten up regulations regarding those lodging places. Airbnb is the most popular term for that, but that's not a generic term. And so there are letters going out to every establishment in town that is one of TGL establishment, and it's also open to the community. So 7 o'clock, Thursday, March 14th, in room A and B. That's it.
All right, thanks. Patty, did you want to say something about the gas tax, or?
Yeah, I do. I think that it's really important to think of this as a user fee, which is what it is. It truly is the people who use the roads. This money would go to the roads, and it truly is a user fee because it's on the gas that you use to be on the roads. And the village would recognize in 2020, I believe, is the first year we would recognize revenues from this, and it's projected to bring us $116,780 that year, with increases each year after that.
Yeah.
So I realize it sounds like a lot, especially given that gas is the price that it is right now, and older folks like me are used to it being way less. But it is truly a user fee, and it would go back into our roads. So it's important to remember that. They are having meetings in Columbus on this, congressional legislative meetings. So if you are supportive of this or if you're against it, it is important to contact your representative this week or next week and let them know how you feel about it.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, the plan is to roughly allocate a 50-50 split between local governments and ODOT, Ohio Department of Transportation. So my guess is that Yellow Springs would benefit a lot, given that I think we're all conscientious about trying to minimize our driving. So, but anyway, Part of why there is an increase in the gas tax being proposed is all our cars are a lot more fuel efficient, and these taxes have not been changed for 10+ years. So we do not, get anything like what we used to get out of the gas tax, and that's why we're having some challenges. I will say the other thing that, folks are advocating for is that active transportation, so trails and bike ped, be a part of, that, what that money goes towards. So it's not just roads and bridges.
Well, the other thing to remember is that if this money is realized, then it does free up the money that we currently use for, say, paving to be used in some other way.
Yep. Okay. I realize that I skipped over the review of the agenda, and I know there was one thing we wanted to do, Lisa, right?
Yeah, I wanted to request that our special reports progressing toward a culture of health be moved up before citizen concerns, because we have guests here tonight, too.
Great. Anything else?
That was the only change I had.
All right. Okay, so then we're going to move into our legislation, and we have the second reading of ordinance 2019-04. And Judy, I think we can do that by title only.
All right, this is repealing Section 452.13, limited parking areas of the codified ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting new Section 452.13, limited parking areas.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right, Patty?
This is simply adding the electric vehicle charging spaces that are outside the Bryan Center here to the list of regulated parking, for lack of a better word. It would be limited to 4 hours maximum and no overnight parking. Those are the rules now. However, those rules are not adhered to by some people because they're not enforceable as part of the ordinance. This would make them enforceable as part of the ordinance by the police department and would result, if someone ignored their warning first, then it would result in them being cited to mayor's court for the offense.
Okay, for potentially a $40 fee.
Yes, $40.
I mean, I would like to add that the reason why we got these chargers for free, right?
We got the Tesla chargers for free, but the other chargers were purchased by the village.
Okay. And, part of what we want to encourage is, using, other forms of energy beyond fossil fuel. And we hope that people come to town recognizing that they can stop in Yellow Springs and charge up their car. But I think the other piece of this that Kevin mentioned is we're not saying that residents can't use it at all. They should just not be like plugging in overnight. And the other piece of this is that, it's in terms of what the village spends, it's less than $100 a month.
Well, is that
Or-
still true, Johnny?
That was true for 18. It could increase for 19 due to the Tesla chargers,
Okay.
but not that much.
All right. So this is the second reading, so I'm going to open a public hearing. Do we have any questions or comments from citizens? Questions or comments from council? All right, if not, Judy, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, McQueen.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Sanford.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. All right, next up we have ordinance 2019-05, and Judy, I believe we can also do that by title only.
Indeed. This is repealing Section 238.04 and enacting new Section 238.04 of the codified ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio.
Can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second.
All right. Adam?
This is simply making a couple of minor revisions to the current investment policy. The revisions are the investment committee itself, adding the 1 to 2 council members to the investment committee. that makes the decisions on how we invest our liquid funds.
Okay, good. And I'll just add, or Lisa, do you want to kind of add what the impetus was for this?
Yeah, I think primarily the impetus of this was to make it very clear that the council members, the council as a whole, should be more engaged and involved in investments. We have discovered already through some changes in investment strategies that we can maintain the liquidity that we need to maintain in order to, pay the monthly bills, if you will. We can, but still invest more in very safe and acceptable forms of investments for a municipality. So we want the council to, in perpetuity, be more involved. And so we just changed the formation of this committee to always have at least one council person. Right now, we have two.
Yeah, thanks. And I think I also want to highlight that last year we quadrupled our return on investment for the funds that we have in our general fund, which is very important because that means another sidewalk or, some other like amenity that we need for the village. So, yeah. Okay. So with that, this is also a second reading. I'll open the public meeting. Any questions or comments from citizens? All right, if not, Judy, roll
Yes.
please.
Yes, Stokes.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Sanford.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
House.
Yes. All right, and last piece of legislation is our 2019 village goals. We have, and thanks to Judy, put out there, what those goals are all about to get some feedback. We'll also be doing a little bit more intentional surveying to get some ideas about things that we might be missing. But with that, we've talked about the goals for several months now, and I think it's apropos to officially approve them. So with that, any questions or comments? All right.
Just need a motion.
Yes. I didn't, yeah, I
That's right.
thought we probably didn't, so can I get a motion to approve?
I move.
Second.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So,
trio.
I believe we have Dr. Sherlock and Dr. Seek. So, want to hear all about the culture of health?
Should I give just a really, really quick
Yes, please do.
preamble to why this is here, other than that it's important to have a culture of health? Dr. Seek and a group of other people from the community, and I wish I could name everyone right now because it was really a wonderful team effort, submitted a grant application to Robert Woods Johnson, and through the process of that really did a wonderful exploration of the many ways that our community supported health. And Dr. Seek will talk more about this, but we're not just talking about illness states. There's all kinds of ways that we looked at health. And then at around the same time, I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Sherlock, who's involved in the new Reach Out clinic here in Yellow Springs. And I think that it's not very well understood, and it's really an amazing new asset to the village. And so meeting these two people kind of created what I would call this kind of confluence and an opportunity to really begin to add health and wellness assessments and exploration to the work that our council is doing. So to kind of get that work started, it's something I'm really interested in. I thought it would be great for the council and the community to kind of get a baseline of what's gone on thus far, and then we can talk a little bit after they both speak about where we might go next. So thank you for coming.
Sure. So this group of people that came together to talk about a culture of health came through a prize competition announcement from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, which, if you listen to NPR, is a group that does a lot of research and interventions on communities and community building and health and social justice. And so if you want to go to the next one. This particular one was recognizing communities that are building a culture of health. And so it's focused on the process of kind of how do you focus on health defined very broadly. So they talk about like issues related to affordable housing and access to services and more of the social determinants of health, more than what you would think of in a traditional health setting. Do you want to go to the next one? So our application was an opportunity to kind of bring these groups together and introduce to the community what Yellow Springs is doing. It was a 3-stage process. We made it into the second stage. We didn't make it on to the finalist stage, which is disappointing, but doesn't really take away from all of the great work that's been happening here. You can just flip through all of those. So the way the application went, they asked us to highlight our strengths that we see in the community, the challenges that we have, and how we're trying to address them. And the strengths that we talked about were the history of our community in terms of its focus on health and social justice, going all the way back to the naming of the town, the many organizations that we have that really address health in a range of ways. And then the last one, and probably the most important one, is that we have a really active and engaged community working on boards and on different nonprofit organizations and in a lot of really important ways. And then we talked about challenges that we have. These really came from the expertise of the people involved in putting together the application and data from sources like the Housing Needs Assessment. And these were the aging population and the need to support our seniors in aging in place, addressing issues of affordability for seniors and for the general community, and then community police relations. And so we had the opportunity then to talk about different accomplishments that are either ongoing or have already been accomplished in the community addressing these areas. And we were really in a great position because we had to choose from among a number of opportunities to discuss, limited only by really the restrictions of the application. So if you want to jump ahead. So what you'll see is this list of opportunities that we chose, or accomplishments that we chose to highlight. And we made those decisions based on what the application itself wanted to hear about, the kinds of things they wanted us to touch on, and then what kind of challenges we were addressing through these different accomplishments. And then lastly, things that we saw as kind of foundational that kind of set the stage so that other organizations could flourish. So those are the ones that we put together. And then another really big part of this that they were concerned about is how do you work together as a community to create a community that focuses on health and creates an equitable environment. And what was really neat being a part of this for me was that it was something they wanted to focus on in the application, but it was also something that just came up as part of what we're doing. And so that was really a nice observation to have. So these are the ways or the organizations that are involved in creating that. And the last part of this is, now that came out weird. So we put together this figure that represents a portion of kind of all we're doing in the village, addressing these 4 areas that are supposed to be in boxes, that are set forth by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So the physical environment and clinical care. And all of the bubbles that you see are policies, organizations, or projects that are in some way addressing those. And what's a couple of things that are really cool about this is, first of all, the volume of bubbles that are on there. So you can see that we're doing a whole lot in this community to address health in multiple ways. But also, if you look at where the arrows are going, you see that almost all of the bubbles touch more than one of those areas. So we're really not only doing a lot, but a lot of stuff that is kind of cohesive and comes together and addresses multiple things. So even though we weren't invited to do the final round, there's still a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff that's pretty awesome. Another thing that came out of this was that one of the Encore Miller Fellows, Kat Walter, submitted a Culture of Health Leadership application. So if she's selected, she'll get 3 years of training and other opportunities, and there's a funding that comes with it, so she gets to do a community project. So we'll find out what happens with that. So that's all.
So, Cindy, can you mention when we talked about like why you think we didn't advance to the next round?
I think one of the things that they would like to know more about is there a cohesive body that is actually, pushing this forward? And I see that developing in conversations, that have been happening. So I think next time we'll do better. And we'll be stronger. I don't know. Well,
I just want to say I appreciate you pulling this effort together, because I think one thing, and I know Lisa's really behind this, is now that we've formed a coalition that, we want to really think about what culture of health means for Yellow Springs. I think, in my mind, the other thing that I thought about besides that cohesive, intentional effort is you always asked about the metrics. And I want to highlight that to council, because that is always a challenge for any organization, which is thinking about how we measure, that progress, whether it's health, whether it's, with our, village policing. But, that was the other thing that I thought would be good for us to think more specifically about.
I think that's true. We'll get feedback, what they didn't like, but I mean, even if they don't care about that, I agree. That's an important thing to consider. I also want to just say thank you to all of you all for supporting this and engagement in a lot of the, bubbles that you see up there. I think that kind of leadership support is really key for making something that goes beyond a patchwork of initiatives and really becomes a cultural thing. So thank you to you all.
Yeah. Sort of hard to see from here to there, but
It is.
I'm not seeing a couple things, which maybe you're somewhere else, but for example, I'm not seeing the wellness center and all the people that we have that do wellness activities, or the farmer's market, or the CSAs, things like that.
That's a good point. There are a lot more things that could be on there. We were limited in space, so when you try to put this onto, a quarter of a page, it becomes unreadable at some point. So we had to compromise between having something that was complete and something that was readable, and we went for readable.
But I think some of it is chopped off.
So the boxes, for some reason, didn't show up. I don't know why.
I see, there's health behaviors, and then there's
Yeah.
something listed under there.
I recall in the application, though, the scope and number of healthcare practitioners and holistic caregivers was definitely addressed. I don't recall whether the farmer's market was there, but I know
Yeah,
that
so
we
there
talked
was,
about
there was
the-
more in the application that addressed,
Than just
and,
visual.
I mean, I'm happy to send it to you, and you can take a look at it. It really is fantastic to read it and read, sort of a complete picture of what we're
I think it would be nice to see
doing.
the application.
Yeah.
And the
'cause I
video.
didn't know much about it.
Yeah, so I don't know where we stand with being able to show the video, but part of the second phase of the application was we had to make a video with people from the community. And so we interviewed 4 people. Sean
Yeah,
did
kudos to Sean.
tremendous kudos to Sean. He took 90 minutes of material and condensed it into 4 minutes of a cohesive story, which sounds like magic, but is actually a lot of skill.
Can it be shown on our Channel 5 or our YouTube station, or is that not appropriate? Or-
We have 3 outstanding release forms to get filled, and then we can do that.
Yeah, so, just so everyone heard, once we get the release
Oh, I
forms
see.
all together. And, I'd love to have, I think, our application in the next packet, Judy, just
or
so
is it
people can see.
electronic? I don't know how long it is.
It's not
It's
that long.
two 5-page
Yeah.
documents.
And
I
then
mean,
you
it
can-
really is
And then you
awesome.
can see the whole,
Yeah.
diagram, because it's not, it's chopped off here.
Cindy, and you also mentioned that you saw an organization sort of loosely developing that could be the body that's pushing, this narrative further. Is that the Reach Out program or something else?
No, I think that's part of it, but I think it's, community folks coming together and continuing to talk about this and push it forward, and I think
Yeah,
Lisa's.
I'll have a recommendation
Hmm?
once we're done.
Okay. Okay.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks, Cindy. All right. Sharon?
I'm Sharon Sherlock, for those of you who have not seen me before, but I'll be sitting in on some of the council meeting as part of that learning about your community. I'm hired by Wright State University, their Population Health Division, to do reach out of Montgomery County. It's a free clinic for the medically underserved. It has two actual missions. One of those, of course, is to do service delivery to those people who are not insured or underinsured, and that's a lot of us in this population today. And also to do education and training for our future professionals, and some of them professionals from pre-med at UD all the way through doctoral programs through Cedarville Pharmacy and other entities. So what we do is have this double mission so that we can do a culture of wellness better in the near future. So I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction to what is Reach Out, because it's always a question. A free clinic in today's environment fills the gaps for safety net programs through healthcare. It could be you can't afford your pharmacy. It could be I can't see my doctor and I just got out of the hospital for 2 weeks and I need to be seen. There are a lot of gaps in the healthcare system, and so we're just one little community nonprofit that fills some of those gaps for a diverse population. And so we've been in existence for 25 years, and we were the start of a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation grant, so I thought maybe that helped push it over the edge. But during that time, we keep gathering more information about what in a community really needs to be filled for health and wellness and a culture. And so it's an academic focus, but it's also a service delivery. So we have 600 volunteers at our main station, and right now we have like 5 physicians at the Yellow Springs Clinic, so we're real proud of that for a new start from November. So we're really progressing along. And they come together to help for no fees. These are all volunteer physicians to help fill your gaps of your medical needs. So we're real proud of that. We serve a diverse population. We think we are very equitable in access issues. We help people get on insurance in addition to service delivery of medical care, prescriptions, treatments, those kind of things. But we also like to make sure that they're equally treated when it comes to access. There's nothing worse than saying, gee, we don't have that specialist in the area. Good luck in trying to find that orthopedic. Well, we'll help you find that orthopedic surgeon or whatever you need. So our little spot in Yellow Springs is just the beginning of a clinic. We'd like to grow and become part of the community. We know there's needs here. They're not always announced or known, but we are seeing them through every patient that we deliver. And so we gather information to help, again, cover that culture of wellness for everyone. So we're just now starting again, like I said, to do some preliminary clinic work and medication assistance, and we already had one death, so it's really been traumatic for us to start so quickly and already see that when you don't have access to care, that, you know, it can be detrimental. We couldn't do this without volunteers. We have lots of, these are the types of volunteers that we have, and coming to the clinic now at Yellow Springs, we have med students in pre-med, and we have St. Mary's Development giving case management information. We have enlisted the Public Health Department to come, and we're just trying to open that span so that we have all the knowledge about Greene County. What are the resources? What are the resources you need to maintain your health? At our main campus is the pharmacy, but we've been able to have pharmaceuticals available for the patients in the clinics. So no matter where you live, we still have some access to free medication. It is a charitable pharmacy. It's been in existence since 2006, and they serve over 18 to 25,000 scripts per year. So they're pretty busy. It's the real thing. The limitations of a charitable pharmacy are no narcotics. That's one thing that the state requires us to do, is not dispense narcotics. But that doesn't mean we can't write them and have you go out to Walmart or Kroger or anything. So we feel like we're full service. We can do diagnostics, especially lab at no cost. Radiology, we partner with the hospitals, but there is, of course, some insurance or some cost once you walk into the hospital. We have case management for psychology and behavioral health and physical therapy. We also have an outgrowth into the community. We decided 5 years ago that if we're going to keep people out of the emergency room and keep them healthy, we need to understand what that community sees themselves. So we got into the fire departments, and we work very closely with Jefferson Township and Riverside. And we work with them looking at those frequent visits to the emergency room. And we knock on doors with our paramedic, and we say, how can we help you? One story is a lady had cellulitis, which is a wound on her leg, and she had not had her hot water heater work for about 6 months. Well, there are resources for that, and the next day they came in and replaced her water heater. We have stories after stories after story of people engaged in healthcare, and they get better. So we are here for your community to see what we can lend for the culture of wellness and what services we can offer. We've been graciously invited into the AME Chapel to hold our clinic at no cost, which is very gracious of them, and we're there every Tuesday night between 4:30 and 6:30. One of the things we like to do every time we enter a new community is to do a little analysis of what is in need in your community when related to healthcare. But healthcare honestly touches everything from access to food to transportation. So our students have a goal to try to do an assessment of your community, and then we have that published. It's not pure research, but it is an assessment for you to make better decisions on where are the gaps of your healthcare system. What does your population think is needed for healthcare? So that's one of the reasons I'm coming here tonight, to see if that might be an opportunity with our graduate students to do a little bit of I call it a little study, and to present to you. We did it for Jefferson Township. We came back with recommendations, and you know what happened is our people took over the fire department and started doing yoga classes every Tuesday. And then in Riverside, our seniors we got an EPA grant to do respiratory. We started fixing equipment, making sure that every police and fire department know where every electrical appliance that is life essential is located in case of a disaster. So lots of good things can come out of that community assessment, and then we just keep building on it, hopefully to meet your needs.
And Dr. Sherlock, do I remember correctly that you guys do that assessment at no charge?
There's no charge. This is a student-driven, but it is faculty
Yeah, well,
overseen.
I mean,
Yes.
I think I can speak for council to say we would love to do a community health assessment. I mean, I think that would be, because, now that we've got this, group together that wants to think about that, community of health, I think it's really important that we think about how we direct those activities. So, yeah. And do we have an opportunity to, I guess, maybe add a few questions?
Oh,
that might
well,
be-
we'll want your input.
Okay,
In
good.
fact, we'll want your outline. It's
Great.
got to be very specific. Even though I live just down the road, I do take part in a lot of the activities in Yellow Springs, so, including the Wellness Center. I want to get that in. So we want to make it specific to your community. So we'll be having rovers out on the street asking questions and surveys, and it's not pure research, but it is a dot in a moment. When we did it for Riverside, EPA looked at it online and we got a grant.
Yeah.
So you never know the opportunities of people that read it.
Yeah, and I'll say Lisa and I and Patty saw the Riverside assessment, and it's very impressive. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's available online at DaytonReachOut.org. Both of the assessments are there, and I really, I'm getting a sense of support from council members, I know that folks that worked on the Culture of Health application have some ideas, and they're things very similar to what was covered in the Riverside assessment. So, it includes environment and transportation, and people are worried about food accessibility and nutrition. The council, Dr. Sherlock and I have talked about what we have on our plate right now with the village manager search. That's taking up a lot of time vetting the many great applications we have. So it's a good problem to have, but we really want to be able to focus on this. And so what I propose in terms of timeline is that Dr. Sherlock's students could begin doing some of the behind-the-scenes assessment that's based on publicly available information. And then as we get closer to the end of the month, we can think about putting together a team of people that is interested in partnering on this and really launch it, involving community members and council members more actively in early April. And it's about a 3-month process, so, but some of the work can begin behind the scenes.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And just for the audience, even though we're for the underserved, we're still available on Tuesday nights if you have a question. You can't get enough of people understanding their medication, insurance, those kind of things. We welcome walk-ins for that information. We kind of have the ins and outs of most healthcare systems, so we'd be glad to help.
And Dr. Sherlock, I was keenly aware of what you said. I think it was the Riverside community where you said there was a grant that afforded you all the opportunity to identify medical devices in the community. I'm very interested in that, and one of our commissions, the Human Relations Commission, tries to gather that information and give it to the police, and especially in a community like ours that has a power outage every now and then. It would be good to be able to know where folks are that have that equipment, and I wonder if there was opportunities for maybe some battery backups for some of those devices.
See,
So-
those are grant opportunities, and I'm sure Kettering's doing like little wristbands on their Alzheimer's type patients. There's so many opportunities. It's so exciting to see the communities kind of pick up
Yeah.
the gaps in safety.
Right, good.
Yeah.
Sounds very exciting.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're looking for, is ideas that the community needs. Not, you can read needs assessments, and I believe the Greater Dayton Area Hospital just completed one, but it's tri-state. So digging it down to your level is really what we're doing, is just making it personal for your community,
Right, all right, good.
because you're the leads that make the decisions. Okay?
Excited.
Yes.
Marion?
Uh-huh.
I have a question about the free clinic. If there were someone in emotional distress, would that be an appropriate place to go?
Well,
They
we
didn't,
can.
they had
we're not-
no other, knew of nothing else.
Correct. We know the resources that we need, and after a few questions, we can tell what type of resources they need and
that-
get those directed to them. Yeah. We have 52 hours per week open at the Dayton shop, and that's through the day. Our volunteers are in the evenings, but we welcome anyone to come in with questions or concerns.
Thanks, Dr. Sherlock.
welcome.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you
We're
both for
excited
coming.
to move this
Thank you.
forward. Thanks, Dr. Seek. All right. Okay, so we are. Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Krieger.
And thanks, Dr. Krieger. Yes. Lots of doctors up here. All right.
Nurse doctors.
Okay, so we're now into citizen concerns. Again, I want to remind everyone that citizen concerns is for any topic that's not on the agenda. So if you are here to say anything about the Millworks, that's going to be coming up later. But for any other topics that are not on the agenda, we welcome any comments, and we ask that you limit those comments to 3 minutes. So,
And
Yes.
feel free to walk across and have a seat.
yes.
Really, it's
That's right.
fine. Just come on in.
Come on in.
Come on in.
That's right. Thanks, Lisa. All right, so do we have any citizen concerns? Okay. I guess that's not a citizen concern. All right, so, do we have any emergency calls? All right, so if not, I guess we're gonna move into old business. And the first thing on old business is the police assessment. Lisa and Marianne, I guess you guys are talking about that?
Yeah, I included the proposal that Lisa and I had made, but what I really wanted to talk about, unless they're council people or citizens who wanted to talk about the proposal itself, was the visit by Bob Wasserman.
Yes.
So, Lisa and I have been doing some outreach to find an appropriate consultant who could come to Yellow Springs to help us look at various aspects regarding the police department, things like the policies and practices of the police department, and do they fit with the size town we have, internal dynamics within the police department, community police relationships, and processes for citizens' complaint. Those are sort of the big area of, that we were particularly thinking about. So in our course of seeking some resource people, we found someone who could potentially be a great fit. His name is Bob Wasserman. He was an Antioch student. He married a local, well, actually Don Hollister's cousin, Susan Hollister. He interned with Chief McKee, and then he got a degree from University of Michigan and has been working in the area of police reform, police assessment, community police relationships for, I don't know, I guess a number of decades. He's older than me. He has maintained ties with Yellow Springs. So he's been following what we've been doing, and he actually said he would be willing to work with us within our budget, which we had already been told we wouldn't be able to get someone of his quality to work within our budget. So at any rate, he is coming for a visit, just a free consult on Friday. He will, I don't exactly know the hours he'll be here, but it'll be Friday morning for sure, possibly Friday afternoon. So I wanted us here at the table, and the chief is not here, but Patty, I guess you can represent the chief, to talk about who should meet with him, how we might have that happen. I assume we can't, all council members, because of the sunshine law, can't see him all together. I wasn't sure if we could see him in pairs, or so maybe Judy can provide some guidance about that.
We're both nodding. You can't see her, but yeah.
So we could do pairs, yeah.
Okay, so I'm hopeful that all of us, I guess I'll ask, would all of council members be available for just getting together with him?
I can be available for a scheduled time on Friday morning.
And I think he should see the chief, and I don't know.
Myself and the chief, at a minimum. Sergeant Knapp should be on duty on Friday, so Sergeant Knapp.
These will be private meetings. This is not going to be a public meeting, but, and it'll be a time for him to give us whatever feedback he might have, and for us to see, like, would we want to go further?
If it's possible, maybe you and I could be the final conversation,
Probably a good idea.
because then he'll have an impression and we can talk to him about the project.
I would also, if we could include some of the folks from the Justice System Task Force, and they could be part of those council pairs, potentially. I saw Kate.
The task
Yeah.
force
Task
or
force
the
or the
commission?
commission?
I don't know.
Well, the
Have
commission.
Well, we don't have the
formed.
commission
Okay,
formed
so
yet,
just the
but
task
I mean,
force.
just people that, worked on that for a couple years. So, I see Kate here, I think about Pat, like some other folks that,
Maybe
I think
Janet.
Janet, yeah, sure.
How
So-
long do we know the time block where he'll be here yet?
No, we don't have that. And potentially, if there were some citizens, I mean, I don't, we're not going to have a big public meeting, but if there are a few citizens that would like to sit in on a meeting with him, if we can figure out time and way to do that, we'd happy to do that. Just contact Judy.
If you do it really quick, like by tomorrow noon, I might be able to get something in the paper that says you're having a meeting to which the public is invited, but
So I'm a little concerned because this isn't the community meeting. We're
Right.
really just in the early phases of basically interviewing a consultant. So I mean, certainly, we know he's an amazing resource, but I don't think we should confuse this being the project
Yeah.
with this early fact-finding. So I get what you're saying, Brian, but think more about this being a,
Well, and that's why I'm thinking about the people that have been doing the
Right.
work
Yeah.
for several years, like Kate and Pat
Yeah.
and a few others. But I agree with you. I think there's a second opportunity which is broader.
which is something that's part of the proposal.
Yep.
And just to tag on to that issue a little bit, in the proposal, we had talked about the pros and cons of convening a community meeting before or after we had, a consultant on board, knowing that there's a sense of urgency to continue to listen and to understand how to improve community and police relations in Yellow Springs. But because Mr. Wasserman seems like he's available, ideally, if we can move forward on the contracting process, then that community meeting could be something that he advises on.
Yep.
Because really what we need is his expertise.
Right. So I think my main thought is if we can get those three dimensions represented, council, police team, and, citizens that have, been in the mix, that, might be a nice, initial,
Good idea.
yep.
Okay. All right, well, as I hear from him, he's out of the country right now, coming back in, well.
The day before.
Friday, yeah, well, I think literally the day before, so,
do
okay.
you want me to do some of that outreach? Do you want to do the outreach to the folks who've been, involved in past? Just let me know, and then I'll take whatever direction you need in terms of setting anything up or
talking
just
to me,
waiting
or-
to hear.
Well, I don't think we could, until we know what time, it's gonna be hard, I think, to reach out to anybody. Although you could maybe foreshadow,
if-
the help would be nice, right? To have, I'm
Yeah.
talking to you, Marion, to have Judy help with that.
Yes.
I'm good at foreshadowing, just let me know.
If one or the two of you can deal with the staff, make sure that we have staff,
I'll take care of staff.
and Judy be the justice system task force person.
Okay.
Thank you, Judy.
And then you guys can lead, I mean,
Well, Judy will have to arrange with the council members, too.
right, yep. Awesome.
Okay, I plan on, I'm just gonna make myself available the whole day,
I-
pretty much, so.
I can't quite do that, but maybe we could bookend. You know what I
Okay.
mean? We could meet
Yeah.
with him first and then
Yeah.
meet with him at the end of the day. I'll
Okay.
try to move things around.
All right,
Okay.
great.
All right, this is great
That's
that this is
it.
moving forward. Thank you.
No, do you wanna?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, any questions or comments from citizens? All right, this is very great initiative. Okay, the cell tower. Patty?
I was not here at the last meeting, but what I was asked to do was contact Marianne Manolis from SBA and ask them what their best offer was. Their best offer is $305,000, which is $25,000 more than they offered before. So this is their highest and best offer. The conditions are still the same as previously proposed. Staff still recommends that we proceed with the buyout, and just a reminder that council did agree to allot some of that money should we choose to move forward to clean up Sutton Farm and do a little bit of renovation on a building there. So-
Right. Okay, council?
Yeah, I want to clarify, make sure that I understand, Patty. The current agreement, as I understand it, is that they have either a 99-year renewable lease or a perpetual lease that has in place certain increments of increasing the rental fee over, what, every 15 years or something?
It's a 99-year lease with renewals, and it has an escalator every 5 years, I believe.
Okay, so when we were doing the talking before, I did not understand that. That's an important piece to me, because it's not like we can get out of this thing. We're in it. It's just how we're in it. Do we get all our money now, or do we keep getting the money over time? So, I mean, I'm okay going, I would go with staff recommendation.
Okay, we did not do the time value of money calculation, I guess.
Colleen did not get it to me. I
Okay.
apologize. I can tell you that with the escalator and this new dollar amount, it would take just over 16 years to get that amount of money. With the-
Without factoring in time value of money, though. I
Correct.
mean, that's just a straight, yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And, you know, I don't want to sound like a stick in the mud, but I feel like one. I mean, I would have expected, and when I was asked what I wanted, I'm not sure when this was, but I propose that we make a counteroffer. The difference between what was done and what I was expecting was, I mean, the current offer on the table was 280,000, and there were numbers tossed around that, you know, typical cell tower buyouts, you know, go for 400,000, 500,000. So I would have expected a counteroffer be made for something in that neighborhood, and maybe they still end up coming down to 305, I don't know. And I will say again, 2 meetings ago, I used the word trust, and it was not staff that I didn't trust, it's these folks I don't trust. And when we asked them to give us our best and final offer, I don't trust that this is the most they can do. It's just the most they want to do now. So again, I would have preferred a counter offer and then allow them to come somewhere else, you know, if we're deciding to go ahead and go forward with the buyout.
I don't think you were explicit about that.
But we could also do that. I mean, that could be our decision.
Would they-
We could make the counteroffer amount
Well,
tonight.
there was another email that was not included. I thought it was in the same email chain as this one, but apparently it wasn't, where she expressed confusion over exactly what we thought our lease was worth, given that there is nobody on the lease currently and they don't regularly use this tower. So I will tell you that.
Right.
And I would submit that if they're making the argument, and I will generalize that as saying, they're suggesting that the tower's not worth much. So if they're suggesting that it's not worth much, why are they willing to pay us $280,000? So, you know, again, it's just a matter of, you know, I would expect a corporation like this to pay as little as possible, as little as they can get away with. And I would think it would be in our best interest to make an offer that we think is reasonable. And I don't know that the number of current tenants on the tower factors into the potential value, the future value of a cell tower. So if we don't feel like that we need to settle on this, and if council feels that it's legitimate to make a counter offer, and again, I think the message I sent, and it was a sample information from a company that negotiates cell tower buyouts, you know, and they were saying on average, you know, a company that spent billions of dollars buying towers, on average, they paid, you know, $400,000 to $500,000 for each of them. Again, is that real? Does it matter? Does that apply to Yellow Springs? I don't know, but, and I think the next question is, you know, do we want to stay in the lease and ask, and propose higher rents.
The rents are set by the lease.
We're in it.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're already in that, so.
I don't want to have, I mean, we've talked about it for what, about 4 council meetings. I guess I'm more interested in making a decision, and moving on, rather than spending 20 minutes every council meeting.
Well, and I think we're gonna do that tonight.
Okay.
I'm confident. Lisa Canetta?
I agree that to say that something is not very valuable and then up the ante is a little bit of a mixed message, but this is not my area of content expertise, and so I am just kind of listening primarily.
But you make a valid point, though. You know, it really doesn't matter what the subject matter is. You know, they're saying, oh, it's not worth that much. You know, but if you want some more money, we'll give you another $25,000. I mean, that's the message I'm hearing.
Can
So
I-
I'm kind of thinking about I guess if we push back and they're unhappy about that, then we're staying month to month, essentially.
Right.
And I guess weighing that option, is staff worried that that's what's gonna happen, is that they're gonna feel like they're too pushed?
I can't answer that question. I mean, I think that it's 50/50. They could choose to withdraw it and just say, we'll just stay in the lease, or they could choose to respond with, that's our best, or this is what we'll give you.
So I guess that is the key question, right? We've always been taught to look at our BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, right? So it seems to me like the BATNA on this is, if they just say, okay, then never mind, forget it then, thanks anyway. You know, would that be a bad thing? And if not, I think we should push it.
Yeah. I mean, my sense is it's not a terrible thing for us. You know, because, I mean, we still have the lease. I understand that it'd be nice to, you know, do that cleanup piece. But what do you think, Patty?
I think that we have a lot of infrastructure needs that have been detailed. Is it a continuing source of revenue monthly? Sure it is, and it will continue to be that. But, you know, we just went through our presentation of infrastructure, and what we could accomplish with this money would be a couple of pretty good steps. So, you know, given it's 50/50, my recommendation would stay the same and proceed with the buyout. But if that's not what council wants to do, then we'll proceed differently.
So the two most important things I want to emphasize are, one, that the village has, you know, part of the agreement will be that we can attach whatever we want on that cell tower, as well as the county,
Yes.
no charge. And secondly, that they cannot change what they're doing there, right? So they can't like double the size of the cell tower or create something else.
And thirdly, they can always be there.
Yes.
They can be there in perpetuity.
Well, I mean, so that's I talked about the two things that are in our
Well, I
favor.
mean, I
But you're
think
right,
it's
but
important.
but there's that other piece that, right, like they have it in perpetuity. So I'm gonna propose that we counteroffer $350,000. And I actually think, when I look at the time value of money calculation, even though it wasn't officially done, I mean, we have to remember that that's a significant amount of money when we're looking 20 years out. And I do agree with, you know, villages, our village staff assessment that we have things that we need to do now. And that's why I would go with, that we should go with the offer, but counter offer with 350. So I'll make that motion.
Okay, I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we made a decision. All right.
Yay, us.
Housing Advisory Board, Mary Ann.
We had a 3-hour Housing Advisory Board meeting. That was the kind of meeting that ended up having more questions than answers. You ever been to that kind of meeting? So, I'm trying to, my mind is still on the cell tower. Well, I think I know what I can say. I don't need to look at that. We spent a fair amount of time talking about the glass farm, how to move forward with that. I think there had been this idea that we would have a contest among grad schools to develop a concept plan, and we decided to nix that idea. Just didn't, for various reasons. We think that we probably need to have someone who has more expertise than we do here with our board or even in the village to help us think about how to develop a concept design. Council is going to have to make some decisions. A big decision I think council is going to have to make with input from the Housing Advisory Board and Planning Commission probably is the mix of houses to go on the property, at least conceptually the mix. That would be the amount of affordable houses that would be subsidized, the amount of market rate, the ratio of rental to home ownership, and the styles of houses, townhouses, standalone, single families, little cottages, tiny houses, apartments, whatever. It's a lot to wrap our head around, and then looking at our goals, what our housing goals are, looking at what that property can sustain, looking at what the community is would support, lots of moving parts there, but I haven't mentioned them all. So we have another meeting on the 25th or the 26th, the Housing Advisory Board. And in the interim time period, we're going to be doing some research, both reaching out to some consultants, talking to some communities that have worked with nonprofit and for-profit housing organizations, trying to find some similar situations to our situation. Like, how did you do it? What kind of relationship did you have with the nonprofit? You know, was the community involved? How did it meet your goals? Some legal issues, and that's where we are, I think. I don't know, Kanetta, do you have anything to add to what I just said? And Karen was at the meeting too.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the coverage there, and especially thinking about Glass Farm, looking at funds that we could use for pre-development. I think that's really important to kind of just get that jump started.
It wasn't only the glass farm that we talked about. We also talked about partnership with Home Inc. We talked about reaching out to other landowners of properties that are going to be developed to find out what do they want, how can we work with you to create housing that the village needs. Marketing, there is some marketing that already the Chamber, Home Inc., and 365 have been working on. So there were a number of topics we talked about, but I'd say it's the glass farm and the partnership with Home Inc. Those are the biggest sort of things that we have to wrap our heads around and get more questions
Is there,
answered.
oh, I'm sorry. Is there, when I think about private property, whether the village could buy that, then that makes me think about the DCIC. Was there talk about how that could be a?
Yes, we talked about the DCIC in some regards. For example, does it make sense to have the Affordable Housing Fund be housed in the DCIC? That's a question. Or with the village, or someplace else. There's some definite advantage to having the DCIC house it, because it can reach out and get grant money and loans and things, which the village can't do.
So I saw it in the notes, but we hadn't talked about that other than seeing it in the
No,
notes.
yeah, we have.
I mean, I think the thing about the DCIC is it could hold the funds. It could also hold the actual property. You know, the actual glass farm property could be placed into the DCIC. You know, and
Well, that would, yeah.
that, which is a very common thing for a DCIC to hold property and then be
Yeah.
able to work with it. So, I mean, that would be something we could
So
certainly talk about.
That's one of the things is for you and me to talk at minimum.
Yes.
Karen, is there anything else that you could think of to just, would want to bring up right now?
I think we identified that there probably
Could-
was a stronger role. for planning.
Could you come to the microphone? Because they won't be able to hear you at home with their popcorn. We understand this does happen.
Karen Wintro. I think we did decide that on the glass farm that there probably was a role for Planning Commission to look at the topography, look at utilities, look at infrastructure, and that would be something that could help inform a consultant. And I also remembered the study that Ken LeBlanc had done. Has that disappeared? I mean, I'm
No, I
I'm
haven't.
assuming
We
that that
haven't.
is somewhere that could be
Yeah.
You
referenced.
mean the
because
mock-up that he?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
some kind of a report,
Yeah,
yeah.
we have it still.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you covered most of it.
Thanks. So, okay, first of all, I mean, we do need to do more study on the soil, clay, whatever, right? mean,
No,
or
I-
Do we have that, where that's done?
We have that. I contacted Terracon, which is the company that did the original geotechnical survey, and they said, we did 18 samples, we don't feel like you need any more.
No more borings? Okay. So we know what we could potentially do there, in terms of like.
No, we don't know what
We
could-
know where
what
the.
the soil is, but we don't have the information to say, this kind of unit could fit there, no problem. This kind of unit is going to have a problem and you'd have to do extra work. We don't have that information. I
Okay,
mean,
Yeah.
we don't have that expertise.
There are some places where the water table is gonna be too deep, or too shallow to do any kind of a basement or anything. There are gonna be areas that won't hold a 2 or 3 story building, but will hold ranches.
Okay.
So those are all part of, to me, that's where Planning Commission would come in looking at that report, looking at the topography, all of that, and making suggestions about that kind of thing.
possibly. I mean, I guess the other way is if we make some decisions about what we want to happen. And I guess, my understanding is part of the conversation was also about, is there kind of a cost benefit in terms of putting more into the infrastructure to be able to add more capacity,
Yeah.
right? More
Yeah.
apartment buildings.
For
or something.
example, if we were to build a 50-unit, 2-story, 3-story apartment building,
Right.
which would probably take more, I'll say, I don't know if infrastructure work is the correct term, but anyway, I'll use that term, more foundational soil prep work, or the trade-off between that extra cost and the value by having that density.
Right.
We don't.
So I guess what my thought is that we should make a fairly strong commitment to affordable housing on the Glass Farm and start making our plans around that. So, I guess part of why I say that is because I think that we have other entities in town that are doing market rate housing. We have infill that's going on. So that's my initial thought, that we just sort of say, hey, we're gonna commit, I don't know, 80% to affordable housing or something like that, and start to make plans around that and see what we can do.
So let me just speak to that. In terms of our goals, and understanding that any other property would be done presumably by a market rate developer, the amount of affordable, by that I mean affordable housing that has subsidy in it, would be at most maybe 25% of those units. That's probably the most. So it would probably be fair to say that the Glass Farm will be the site where most of the new affordable housing, new being over the next 10 years or so, would go. So I don't know if we want to have an extended discussion at council now, but you just proposed a fair amount and you suggested 80%.
I mean, yeah, I think it needs to be obviously vetted more, but just as a way to move forward, because that's what I guess I heard you say is like more questions than answers. I think
Well,
we-
that's one of many questions.
Right,
yeah.
but I think we have to begin with a commitment to like, what are our goals and, you know, our, you know, policy around housing and affordability. And I think it's, you know, that we're pushing forward in a pretty strong way. So I guess that's why I put out 80% or whatever, so.
So let me just, on the face of it, I know this is like just off the cuff, basically, is there,
Well, I admit, at first glance, it sounded high, you know, for the large number of homes that would be there. And I think we still have some questions, Mary Ann, that you proposed about type of homes. I mean, are we talking, you know, units or structures? I mean, you got a, you know, 50-unit apartment, that's 50 going towards that numerical value perhaps of affordable. You know, it's one structure, but 50
well,
homes.
let's say we built 150 units on that property, which would be about the same density as Park Meadows and Thistle Creek. 150 units, so 80%. And then also there's rental to home ownership. We definitely need rental, so. If at this point, council is at least ballpark saying definitely more than half affordable and definitely more than half rental, that might be a place to start from.
That sounds like a good place to start. 'Cause, yeah, if you're doing 150 units, and knowing that we do need to do rentals as well, I mean, 75 is not a lot, but just cutting it in half that way, I think is a good way to go. Half of them rental, half of them affordable housing. Half of that
Well-
150, thinking there still could be more, though.
100 to 200 is what our
Mhm.
sort of ballpark.
So just to clarify, do you want this to bounce back to Housing Advisory Board with a sort of a general recommendation from council, or do you want to have it come back to council for a little bit of a more formal discussion and some more information from
Well, I
HAB, given the,
want it to come back to council, but at least if we are saying, it on the face of it, in this discussion, that council is comfortable at this point of saying substantially, half or substantially more being affordable, and the same for rental, that gives us some direction.
I also feel like I want planning commission to have a strong role here, but we have to give some policy directive before, I mean, not just having them like float around, you know, with that, so, which is why I think, you know, if this is the direction we want to go, then it does go back to housing advisory, comes back, we talk about it more. We want to make sure it's on citizens' radars as well. I mean, we may have some comments tonight, but, you know, I want to make sure people know that this is a clear topic on our agenda to talk about as well. So, yes.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that, just to be clear, I think we're just sort of, if you, spitballing, if you will, you know, that we're not creating policy up here. You know, we're just playing around with the numbers, trying to get a good starting point, and things will change, you know, as we get, you know, more intelligence, and we make more intelligent decisions.
Sure. But I think we need to create that policy to direct these efforts, right? So,
Well, yeah, and I think we have a general direction,
yep.
yeah.
So I agree with you from an aspiration perspective, but for me, I'm starting to see these different moving parts. I mean, one is the topography and the readiness of the land that we know has issues, and that's a major character in our play,
Yes.
Right.
right? So it's all well and good to say, we want this many and this, but that's a big deal, and we don't understand it, you know, or some people probably do, but we don't all. I think that the other concern is just the economic equation of a mixed development where some of it's affordable and some of it's not. And so money can be made on some, but not on others, and how are we going to deal with the economy of the development? And that, to me, money, we can aspirationally want to say 50% or more affordable and rentals, but we still have to see how those numbers play out.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, we can't just act like that isn't part of it. So for me, it's all well and good to say, yes, we are committed to affordability, but we also have what the land can bear and what the bank can bear and how that's going to happen. So if you see me sitting back and not saying anything, that's because those three things are kind of spinning around in my head, and it's just a lot to take in.
And I think those are good things to point out. What I would also say is, we need to remember, if we're putting village resources into this, or, you know, we are thinking about just how this land is dispensed, you know, even if we hand it off, we need to balance that in this mix as well. And, you know, I feel pretty confident that there's a lot of housing development that's being talked about in the mix. So that's another piece we need to think about. Like, you know, I want to make sure that we're tracking what else is happening
Right.
In and around the village.
Yes,
So-
that was something we talked about. So one other piece I think I'll just put out here since we're talking about these. The other thing that there were questions and disagreement about with the Housing Board was the role of Home Inc. Because council had said we wanted Home Inc. to be our affordable housing partner. That means that, for example, if we pulled in another affordable housing partner like St. Mary's that has more capacity, Home Inc. would be our advisor in that process. They would have a relationship with St. Mary's as well. So the questions that came up are there conflict of interests? Are there conflict of interest in Home Inc. helping to develop the plan and then also being a partner or developer? And then there's some on the Housing Board that think it shouldn't just be Home Inc., it should be our partner, which is not my opinion, but some people on the board. And so the conflict of interest, I think, is we need to get more information about it. Is there conflict of interest in them helping to develop our housing plan, helping develop the plan for the glass farm, and then also being a co-developer on the glass farm?
And what is the conflict of interest?
I don't know. But it is worth, I mean, and that was one of the things that we're going to research for communities that have worked with nonprofits or specifically a community land trust and done it as a partnership. How have they done this?
The potential conflict is that Home Inc. is beginning to develop rental properties, and rental properties are a source of income. And if Home Inc. has input into how many and what kind of rental properties are developed, and then realizes the income from the rental properties, is that a conflict? And can part of that conflict be alleviated if this is run through the DCIC as opposed to the village?
All right, or if we formalize the partnership like we've talked about,
Or
right?
or if it
To-
is formalized in some way.
Okay.
Or if we have, other developers.
Right, or should there be a second developer, show up that doesn't regularly work, that would fill the same role as Home Inc., as opposed to partnering with St. Mary's, which is a much larger developer. If there were a smaller developer that came in and would do the same role as Home Inc., would they be not able to develop affordable housing because Home Inc. is our formal partner? I mean, there were a lot of questions about it.
Well, I mean, I want to say again, I think formalizing the partnership with Home Inc. is critical. And we need to also be thinking about, I guess, is it the bird in the hand or whatever? Or, I don't know, but, I mean, we need to keep that in mind. But I don't feel like we've ever discussed that that's an exclusion to working with other partners, right? I mean, so I feel like yeah, this is something that needs to be resolved in, all of this, but not something that should hold us back.
Okay, well,
So that's my opinion.
anything else from council? Did you want to?
Yeah, so, questions or comments from citizens? Malta?
Yeah, so, Malta von Matheson, I was sitting here thinking that Kevin is on your advisory board, and we need
Kevin
to
Magruder.
have him kind of bring you folks up to date, because we're thinking about some of this also at the college,
Yes,
in terms of,
I know.
we have land.
yes, I know. I'm going to be
We're
talking
thinking
with
about
you.
monetizing some of this land, and so it'd be a good idea to get him to input on that and get the colleges thinking on this.
Yes,
Okay.
do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Malta. I like that beard. Yes, Bruce.
Michael Jones. Over the years, I've followed the discussions about affordable housing. I recognize the need for it, absolutely. And I'm not clear whether currently you all are aware of the model that Antioch College had in place in the 50s and 60s. They owned a pool of affordable housing for new faculty who came to teach at the college, who were on tenure track for 6 years, at the end of which time they either got tenure and stayed, or they didn't get tenure and they left town. Either way, at the end of 6 years, they no longer could be in residence in one of the affordable rental units that the college owned. Okay? So it was a dynamic resource that was simply an initial resting place for these faculty, and you could take this model and you could adapt it somewhat, so that rather than they're working, the new residents wouldn't be working toward tenure, but part of the rent that they pay every month, every year, could go, for example, into an escrow, and when they depart, and you could say you have to depart within a certain amount of time, 10 years, 15 years, at the end of which time they would have a dough ball that could be a down payment, and they could buy something, okay? So that then this would become a community tool that could help people get onto the equity track and not simply live their lives in a rented property. You see? And it would be a community resource that would be aimed at the greater good. Okay? I don't know if you're thinking about any of this, but I have not heard, I read the paper and I've never heard any murmurs that would go in that direction. It's as though the community has amnesia about what Antioch College had in play.
You know, I knew that, but I didn't know that there was sort of like, well, it's not rent to own, but that there was money set aside. But were those
No,
new build?
they weren't doing that, but
No, I
that's
know.
what could be done.
But were these new houses that they were renting? I mean, I know like where I live.
Okay, it was the whole block from Xenia Avenue to High Street, and from Limestone Street, no, not to High Street, to Phillips. And
yes.
from Limestone, the next block
That
over.
Lucy Morgan
And then there
had
were
built.
others scattered around
Yeah,
the community. Okay?
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Michael. Any other questions or comments? Yes. Larry?
Larry Gerthoffer. Question, do we know what the percentage of rental properties is right now?
Yes,
How many units we have total and how many are rental?
yes, I forget, it's under 30%, I think. It's dropped from, it was higher 30s, now I think it's under 30%.
Okay, thank you.
The housing assessment, yeah, gave us that information. Thanks.
Yeah, the
Any-
percentage of rental has we've had an increase in housing units over, the last several decades, but the number and percentage of rental units has actually decreased some. Because we've had no rental units built since, Green Met built on Corey, and then before that, maybe the Bill Brown apartments, I guess.
Yes, Richard.
Richard Lapidus. How many rental units are being lost to the onslaught of Airbnbs?
That's why we're having the meeting on the 14th.
I mean, it's not become a crisis, but it's something we want to be proactive about, because we've talked for, about a year now, about, the idea of somebody coming in and buying a bunch of houses and Airbnb-ing them. So we are going to address that. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Matthew?
Hi, my name is Matthew Kirk. I guess I just had two kind of little points of consideration. One, I know we talk a lot about affordable housing, and one thing I'd like to encourage is maybe to expand the idea of affordable housing to also represent more of a quality measure, because I think part of our problem is we have housing stock that's 150, 200,000, lower 200,000s, but it's not in great shape. And for a lot of homeowners, especially first-time homeowners, they won't have the funds to buy a house and then put tens of thousands of dollars into rehabbing it. So maybe, expanding our definition to focus some more on those kind of folks. And then also, with respect to developers and bringing in multiple developers or anything else, another potential approach would be to try to develop the number of small local developers in the community. And there's actually a not-for-profit called the Incremental Development Alliance that does trainings for communities to help them grow the number of small developers in the community. So, thanks.
Thanks, Matthew. Any other comments? All right. Great discussion. Mary Ann, anything else that you need right now?
No, thank you. Appreciate
Okay,
it.
yeah, I appreciate it too. Yeah, I also really appreciate that Mary Ann has been relentless about pushing this forward. And I feel strongly that we're gonna see some action on the village's side with housing, but also appreciate that there's lots of other activity going on as well. Okay, so we have one more piece of old business, which is our village manager search update. So I want to thank Kanetta again for putting together our rubric, and just to kind of give everybody a recap, we had 62 applicants, which was actually one more than last time when we did it 5 years ago. And we've done it internally this time rather than paying a consultant. We have narrowed down from that 62 to 54 and now to 32 applicants. And council, all of us have been involved from the beginning in looking at these applicants. And we also are now using our citizen committee to help us take that 32 down to what we expect to be 12 to 15.
By tomorrow.
Yes. Yes. And in the process of doing that, well, we've been working on it since last week, at least some of us.
Well, Friday.
So, Friday was last week.
Be positive, Brian.
yes, I'm always optimistic. And, these processes, many other communities do it on their own, and I think it's a good thing for us to do as well. So we are planning this week to narrow that down as well as also refine the rubric. So as we look at that last 12 to 15, we will be doing phone interviews, we will be doing reference checks, and again, we will have a consistent group following up on that. The plan is for the first week of April. I'm not sure that we've confirmed those dates yet, but I guess we will be doing that soon.
They're in wet concrete.
Okay, nice. Typically, well, at least the way we did it last time is, Patty knows, it's a 3-day,
Two. It was two.
2 nights and 3 days, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
2 nights and
No.
3 days.
I mean, it was, yeah, well.
I mean, that is what we are going to do. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna expand it, but it's
Yeah.
definitely
Sounds good.
a marathon situation where people will be 3 to 5 finalists will be meeting a lot of different groups in the community. They will be also meeting the community as a whole. So we will have that date for that particular event soon, and also, we will expect to get a lot of feedback, not just from citizens, but also from our staff. Again, council is involved from the get-go to make that final decision. So I think we're on track with our schedule. We nailed down a few things that we didn't have nailed down after the last meeting. And I guess if there are any comments or questions,
Yes.
Mary Ann?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I appreciate the work that was done on the rubric. However, when I started using it, I stopped using it, basically. It's like, each thing has, well, first of all, it's all online. I have to go from one file to another on my computer, which I don't like. I like paper, but, and then it's like each thing, and maybe there are 10 things we have to go through, each thing has 3 to 4 to 5 pieces of it, and each piece has a particular characteristic. So we have to look at about 30 things for each each of 32 people. Well, and then I started realizing there were things in the rubric that I thought were important, like, does this person know anything about Yellow Springs? Did they say anything in their resume, like, wow, Yellow Springs seems like a cool community? Or are they clearly just sending out something to everyone? And another thing is the kind of person that, this year I worked here, this year I worked here, this year I worked here, yeah, I have 20 years of experience and I worked at 20 different places. So anyway, I'm concerned because I don't think we do have clarity about how we're going to get, I mean, who, what?
I'm not worried.
You're not-
No. That's
Judy,
what the
Judy's
meeting-
going to do it.
No, that's what the meeting on Friday's about. It is, that all of that vetting that everyone's doing now, everyone who's doing that sits around a table and says, holy cow, this didn't work at all. This is a question I thought we needed to ask. And every one of those candidates gets re-examined in that light, and the rubric gets refined, and it will be lengthy and difficult, but I think at the end of that, those candidates will have been fairly vetted, and the rubric is going to be a lot tighter and better moving forward.
Well,
That's why we built that in.
I understood that by this Friday, we're going to get down to 3 to 5. Am I wrong there?
Yeah.
You're wrong.
Oh,
So,
that's good.
10 to 15.
10 to 15.
right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so the
Okay.
goal this week is to refine the rubric. So if it's cumbersome, those are the comments that need to be put out there. And
just
and
love
as
it.
Judy said, if it's somehow unfairly evaluating any of those 32, we can also address that.
It's like a think, pair, share. We're all individually thinking about the candidates. We'll come together and share what we thought, and then we can kind of evaluate more from there. I do apologize for the rubric. If it's too cumbersome, it's the teacher brain.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it were like 10, then 10 people you were doing on that rubric, but for doing 32 people, where each person has 30 questions, basically, that we have to address, just as over, felt like too much for me.
Well, I guess it is about the kind of brain you have. I'm enjoying it. I mean, it is a slow and deliberative process. That's the nature.
When I talked to you on Sunday, you
Well,
weren't
no, no.
enjoying it.
No, I wasn't even doing it.
You was the one council person, I didn't talk to anyone else.
No, I felt, it was sort of like a fun thing that I anticipated doing, that I did all my other heavy lifting until I got around to that, but, I'm moving slowly through it, and so, I'll get a lot done tomorrow, but it is laborious, but I think that means that we really are gonna come up with, either good candidates or folks that we feel that we could really justify being on the short list or not. I think we'll definitely get there. So, yeah.
And Friday's also, I mean, this week is also an opportunity, if for some reason a gem is not being pulled out through that rubric, somebody's gonna say that. I mean, between these 5 council members and between Jerry Sutton and Laura Curlis and Cheryl Durgans, I have no doubt that we're gonna keep in the 15 to 12 that need to be there. But I agree, and that was built into the process, is we want to make sure that we refine it for next week when we narrow down to that final pool. Okay.
Yeah, because, I've talked to Kenetta a little bit about, my.
Right, Patty's
my-
involved in this too.
My feedback, and, I've got 11 of them left, 11 candidates to go through, and, I'm sure that I'm seeing things differently than most of you are seeing things.
It's good.
Yes. So anyway, mark your calendars, the first week of April, and we will get those dates out very soon. We need to lock that in. Yeah,
Want to
Kevin?
mention the tentative dates, or just wait?
Do we have tentative dates for the April? Yeah, what is it?
The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of April, that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, is what we anticipate having the candidates. I won't get into the details about what the plans, but they'll be here on that Tuesday evening, go through some things that evening. Wednesday, be a lot of heavy lifting, and they'll finish up midday on Thursday, just roughly.
So potentially Wednesday, the 3rd would be the public meeting?
Yeah, that evening.
Yep, okay.
If
So-
members are-
So when I came up on Thursday night and did it all day Friday and all day Saturday and went home. I had my last interview with council at 6 o'clock on Saturday and went home after that. So you've decided to not include a weekend day. And I just want to clarify that, because I don't know if that would make it easier for folks or not easier for folks to participate.
The tentative dates are Tuesday through Thursday
So,
that we've got for now. Yeah, we haven't, obviously, our candidates know
Are you
about it.
making a recommendation that a weekend is better, or?
I'm wondering if the weekend is better for some of the citizens. If the candidate is really interested in the job, they're going to make the effort to be here. But I'm wondering if the weekend day is not better for some of the citizens to participate.
Yeah, I think part of the conversation was about some of the businesses, some of the community, folks, some of the folks in the community, the role they play, for the most part, is the job that they have. So we wanted them to be available, in that capacity. I mean, the Wednesday night event is probably scheduled to start around 7 to 9. And it'll be an open public forum. We will gather questions ahead of time, so the public will have an opportunity to feed those questions to us, but then there'll be time at the end for just some open discussions. And it's, again, it's a lot of moving pieces, but that's what we're working with now in general.
And what's keeping us from just locking in April 3rd?
No,
That is what we've said.
Okay, well,
The other thing was there would be two public meetings. There'd also be one at the senior center in the morning, which would be an informal one.
Thursday
So
morning?
you're saying an evening meeting on the 3rd?
Yeah.
That's economic sustainability, but just FYI.
Yeah.
We
Well,
can maybe,
they start
we
at
can
five,
maybe
they start at
reschedule.
5:30, right?
No, that's the late one.
Oh, they do, 7?
Yeah, we can maybe move it. There's plenty
All
of
right,
time.
well, then we'll make sure they'll all be at this meeting.
Yeah,
right?
good idea.
So, all right, well, I think if there's no reason not to, we should just put April 3rd, 7 PM on the calendar, so the people know, and give that advance notice.
Well, the one thing that we talked about on the Friday meeting was that we wanted to wait until we moved the funnel from the larger number to the 12 to 15 or whatever it was, to make sure everyone felt like, yes, we're on track, this is working, we're going to stay to the schedule before that got set in stone. I mean, if you feel like, nope, let's go ahead and go for it, that's fine. That was the conversation on Friday was, ooh, let's make darn sure we've got everything rolling
This will
smoothly.
keep us on schedule, so let's
Okay.
put April 3rd, 7 PM. Megan, you got that? All right, cool. All right, great. Anything else about the village manager search?
Just
Yes.
clarify, that second session, is that Thursday, just, Marianne, is that Thursday morning at the senior center?
Yes, and then we were going to meet with the council, have the private interviews with council later Thursday morning.
Cool. All right, great. Thanks to our citizen committee, thanks to council for being so involved. It's very important. Okay, so we're on to new business, and we are talking about what I'm guessing everyone's here for, the PUD about Millworks. And so Denise, I guess you're going to start this off.
I will. So, in your packet, you received, I believe actually a little bit earlier than when the packet was sent out on Friday, you received the February 12th meeting of the Planning Commission, as well as the earlier work session and those minutes. I'm assuming everybody did receive that, okay. And then on Friday, you received another report from me outlining specifically in a little bit, try to recap what was approved at the Planning Commission meeting, along with 2 exhibits, Exhibit 1, Exhibit 2, everybody did get that as well, which was a response to some of the questions that came up at the Planning Commission meeting. So just as a recap, the Planning Commission went through each of the sections, and they passed by either majority or unanimous vote all of the qualifying conditions. They did the same with the PUD requirements. Then when they got to the 8 standards, which is required for the Planning Commission to be able to make a recommendation, they passed 7 of the 8. They were split vote on D, which was that the project will be consistent with the public health, safety, and welfare needs of the village. Now, it's not clear to staff, to me, why that didn't pass. I think it was confusing to some of the members. I know that one of the alternate who was making the who asked for clarification, who was filling in because one of our members was gone, and then one of our members had to recuse. So we only had 4, and one of those was an alternate. I don't know if it was clear that a no vote meant that you wouldn't be able to move it forward. I can't speculate what they were thinking. I do know that there were a number of questions and concerns, especially around safety of pedestrian and vehicular relating to traffic. And I think maybe that was possibly, and this is just my guess on it, is it was a vote based on that because it had to do with public health, safety, and welfare needs of the village. I don't know. But I can say that as a result of those questions that came up, the Exhibit 1, Exhibit 2 that's in your packet tried to address those concerns. The Public Works Director
I met with Johnny Burns, and he went over the questions about the safety and the traffic. He didn't have any issues at this point in time, which I also put into the packet, as well as the police department. I know that the applicants did address the issue of noise, crime, and made some suggestions for safety of pedestrians and traffic, which, you know, Johnny was in agreement with. They later then went on to vote unanimously, which might have been confusing in the report, but what they were voting unanimously on was that if council approves this tonight, this rezoning, they unanimously voted on what recommended conditions they would like to see. And if I can just go through those. In the I-1, there is a section that 30% of retail incidental to the manufacturing or production of goods on the premises. Now, I did check, I looked at the Ohio Department of Liquor. I checked with the owners of YS Brewery. There isn't really any state regulation on that. The only thing I can think of is perhaps when the zoning code was written, it may have been put in there as a way to not be in competition with downtown. If you vote to go with the PUD is going to allow live-work artist studios. Those live-work artist studios could also not fall under this 30%. YS Brewery doesn't want to follow the 30% either because their business has grown so much, they need more room for the tap room. And as I mentioned, that isn't anything that is a requirement elsewhere. You can see there are other breweries that have as large, 100% size tap room as they do their manufacturing. So it isn't a state requirement with something in our code. So that's one thing that they wanted to have removed for the PUD. Receiving a broader understanding of traffic safety impacts and any potential need for and cost of infrastructure required to resolve these. We've addressed that. Johnny's looked at that. We don't anticipate any expense for the village at this point. Allow for a deviation to the number of parking spaces. They're asking for 140 spaces and plus 40 bike racks. A noise impact analysis, they address that. A stormwater impact analysis is something that the village will have our own engineer do prior to the final plan approval. We'll calculate that based on what their site plan is. Also, excuse me, also with the 3 residential lofts as affordable rentals, we would put that also into an agreement with the final plan. And then the last one was an agreement to provide some type of mitigation screening, and they were specifically talking about a living wall between where the neighbors are on Walnut Street, which their backyards are abut the Millworks property. There's several homes there.
So you're talking about at the top of the, when you enter into Millworks, like right up, like as you come out to Walnut?
On down towards all the way to Fairfield Pike, there's several homes there.
On the west side of the.
This is on the west side.
Yeah, if you see, let's see. If you,
really see it on there, so.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, that didn't help.
There's a couple, two or three homes. Yeah.
Where, John?
Tim, I think it is, Bingenheimer and our
Okay, all right, so we're talking about, you know, as it, like, I guess, goes towards Fairfield, okay?
Yes.
All right.
And then the last thing that the applicants offered, but and we talked about, but it didn't get into our motion, was no retail stores, because that is one thing that we wouldn't, even though that's allowed in B1, we wouldn't want that to compete, and that is different than producing your goods on premise.
So just back on the first one about 30% incidental, I mean, that's not a condition about size, right? That's a condition about volume of your sales, right?
It's a condition of size. It's like, so if your manufacturing is 1,000 square feet, you can only have 300 square feet be your tap room.
Yeah, that was sort of confusing. I wasn't
Okay, because,
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't read clearly that way. So, all right, but you're saying the interpretation is that it's the size of your operation.
And you're also saying that if we pass this, it would, that restriction would not exist in the PUD, but in general, it would still be part of I-1? Okay.
It would be at this property.
Might be something we would want to review for the PUD in general, or wherever
Or
it
the
shows up.
I-1, yeah. I think, you know, I could go back and try to see if I can find minutes aren't clear. You know, you don't get the dialogue often when the zoning code was updated. But I'm assuming that maybe it was to not compete with the downtown, and that's why they threw it in there. So the underlying zoning is already I-1, so, and everybody realizes that, and I did have in the back of that the uses for I-1. So if they want to expand on these existing uses, they could already do that at the planning commission level. The property owners would like, though, to have the B1 so that they can incorporate some of these new uses, such as the Live Work Artist Studios, the hostel, and the Children's Science Center. One of the things in the vision plan for Live Work that I wanted to read to you was strengthen the economy of the vision document states, provide opportunities and financial incentives for artists and arts-related businesses to live and or work in the community, sustain and recruit artists and arts-related businesses through tax breaks or abatements, arts-designated housing and or studio space, co-housing, and cooperative purchasing arrangements, artists in residence programs. So at least it does meet, one of the Live Work would meet the vision plan. So do you have any questions on specific to that?
No, except just, I mean, my main question was, I also, having watched the meeting, did not understand the rationale behind the vote on D. So, which you already stated, but I guess
I
you don't
didn't
have an answer for that.
No.
And I guess I also want to point out that unless I'm missing something, you cannot pass A in 1254.06 without all the other things being passed, because it says that it meets all the standards. So I don't understand how that could have gotten a 4-0 vote, and then D not, you know, get
I
passed.
think what they were voting on was if you're going to recommend this, if you're going to go ahead and vote on this, this is what the conditions are. I think that's what they were voting on.
Right, but it
Because they
says-
voted on
but-
everything individually.
But I guess I just want to point out, because this is why we did this last in our last process. It says the PUD will comply with the standards, conditions, and requirements of this chapter. So the standards are B through whatever. So you have to pass D to pass A. I mean,
Well, what
So anyway.
happened happened, so
Okay.
now we have to move on.
so yes, all right. So I got on my pedestal and I'll get back off. And, all right, so, do we have any questions for Denise? All right, thank you. So in my mind, I think overall, Planning Commission carefully went through the standards. And I think we've got to look at sort of whether we accept their recommendations on everything else, and then we've got to talk about D. So,
Can I interrupt
Yes.
you for just a moment? You went through part of the process previously, and I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to again just run down the line and have each council member affirm that they have read and understood all of the materials submitted from Planning Commission, including the minutes, and including the Planning Commission packet, so that everyone is completely at the same level in terms of making the judgment call.
okay. All right, so let's do that first. And are you gonna?
Sure.
Are you gonna ask that this time? I know Chris did it last time, but I think it's okay for you to ask that question as well.
Sure. Kanetta, have you read and understood all of the materials submitted to you?
Yes, I have.
Lisa, same question?
Yes, I have.
Kevin, same question?
Yes, I have.
Mary Ann?
Yes.
Brian?
And yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So then, I am gonna recommend that we bifurcate this into, again, evaluating what Planning Commission has recommended to us, sans D, and separate that out and have a discussion. I guess related to that as well, I know we have citizens here that might want to speak. And so I guess I would suggest that we also separate this into, if you have any comments about anything other than the safety welfare piece, which is what we need to discuss, we'd welcome any of those comments about the PUD.
Well, and Brian?
Yes.
Just to, at the last hearing, we made the statement that if your comments had been heard and summarized at the previous hearing, those should not again be repeated, since this is not a rehearing, but a judgment on the decision made at the prior hearing.
Okay.
So that if there were new information to bring forth, that you, of course, wanted to hear that. But the comments summarized for the Planning Commission hearing are there and are specified by speaker.
And I think that's a great thing for Judy to point out, is we have read the record, so we've heard all the comments that have been made thus far. So if there are any additional comments that would be important to our consideration, but again, we are gonna first decide whether we agree to accept the recommendations for everything else that was approved by Planning Commission, and then we're gonna specifically look at subpoint D and whether this is an issue related to health, safety, and so forth. So, do we have any comments from citizens? Melissa?
So I'm just going to address the outside of the safety right now. I just want to preface that our family is not against the new ventures or the ideas of the owners of Millworks, but we have 4 main concerns. 2 of them will be addressed in D. The other 2 are these, that the drainage, although there are plans to address this for Millworks, we're distrustful that this will be addressed well, and over the last 4 years, we've been asked by the village to drip our faucets in order for our water pipes running from Fairfield not to freeze. The storm drainage will require creative civil engineering to take care of the volume of water coming from Millworks and elsewhere, which currently flows directly onto Fairfield, right at the underpass. The rest of Millworks' water runs off the roofs, over the bike path, and into our property in the Bryan Center Woods. The other part is that over the past 3 years, we've had more and more people wandering onto our property, coming through the Bryan Center Woods and through the fence in our gate from the bike path. And in one instance, a drunk man walked into our house while we were home and sleeping, ate food in our fridge, and tried to steal a few items until he was caught by a household member. And although Lisa and Nate at the brewery are very good neighbors and good business owners and talk to us often, the next owners may not be as friendly and open about their conversations with us. Their current permit, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, that your current permit allows to serve beer, wine, and hard liquor and stay open until 2:30 a.m., but it seems they have chosen not to. The next owners may choose to do this and exercise what their permit allows. And I just want to ask the village if this particular area, if they want it to become an entertainment district, because that's what it's looking like right now, and it's surrounded on 4 sides by residential housing, extending all the way to Fairfield. We residents do not.
All right. Thanks, Melissa. Any other comments?
Hi, Matthew Kirk again. I guess I kind of have a few questions I think that maybe you should consider. And one is, should we be in the business of passing changes in zoning where we know the result is going to be a business that's currently a vibrant member of our community and contributes to many local organizations will potentially be displaced? Is that good policy? Does that set the right kind of culture that we want as a community? I think that's an important question for you to consider. Another thing I read in the packet, a letter of support from the former owners, part of what they mentioned and got at was this potentially was the highest and best use for the Millworks property as the PUD, which is a really interesting concept as a village, because I think historically, one of the things we've kind of avoided and been kind of our secret sauce is that we've maybe avoided the highest and best use in some places. I'm sure there's a Starbucks that could go on Xenia Avenue that'd probably be the highest and best use of a local shop, but we've chosen not to do that because of certain other considerations we've taken into. Another thing, I know we talked about the reason for why they maybe said only 30% of a given industrial location could be retail. And one thing I may hypothesize, some of the wisdom that the previous councils and planning commissions were utilizing was that in Yellow Springs, we've had to grow our own businesses historically. You look at all the major employers we have here, they've all been developed here. 2 of the most recent major employers we've had, both the brewery and EnviroFlight, were both incubated at the Millworks as a potential industrial site. What if we had rezoned the building that has become now Dayton Mailing Services to allow for different uses, and somebody put a flea market in there? I mean, who knows, whatever. We wouldn't have that business. So in preserving our industrial spaces, I think there's some inherent value to in the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Larry.
Oh, Larry Gerthofer. I've heard it said many times, we live in a swamp. So I want to just reiterate the drainage issue, not even just on that site, beyond that site. I mean, there are several blocks that have no storm sewers whatsoever. And if that would be addressed in the future, where would that go? And there's only one way to go, and it's downhill. And it's through that corridor or areas of that corridor. So if you're going to make a major infrastructure change, I think it behooves us to look at that a lot. That's serious money. Not that that should stop this thing, but having them come in and say, we'll assess drainage at the final plan review. Now, I understand some of that. It's about impervious nature of parking lots and so on and so forth. Roofs, how many roof lines and things like that. I think it's fair to say, if you're going to cover up the grass that's there now, which is, what, 25 or 30% of that lot, you're going to be creating a lot more runoff. So it's important to give that a little more forethought. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Actually, Johnny, can you come up and talk a little bit about the stormwater drainage implications?
We've got it narrowed down to 2 engineering firms. Matter of fact, earlier tonight, I was reading one of them. They've already sent a proposal back, but we are looking at doing sections of town that we know have problems, and one of them is North Winter Street that has been addressed. Some of it is on Orton Road, some is on Rice Road, and then a general overview of the entire village. So we are moving forward, waiting on the other one to come in.
Okay. And what about with this project? What are your concerns, if any?
I really don't have none for this one, other than maybe adding a crosswalk for safety on Walnut Street right there. The storm, I think it's in a pretty good location. I know that they're going to put in some more surfaces and they're going to address it. And it does run down behind the Bryan Center, down into the Glens, and then goes out that way. They do have tile underneath the bike path, and they also got two catch basins on that side of the property. So if a swell needs to be cut in beside the bike path to run it down towards the storm sewer, I'm sure that they would do that.
Okay. Thanks, Johnny. Okay. All right. Any other comments? Okay, council, other questions or comments that you have, I guess about like some of the general pieces, Kevin?
Well, I think to maybe address Matthew's concern, this might be a Denise question. Since the underlying zoning is I-1, and we're just sort of laying over, I'm going to say B1 for the sake of argument, but it still maintains I-1, so you could still do industrial in there, so we're not taking away the ability to do industrial. And I'm a just share with where my struggles are and where it's tough to, it's a tough job to departmentalize what our role is. You know, it's clear the things that we're being asked to address. And the hard part is to just address that and just stay within there. You know, as a citizen, you know, I would have questions and say, well, you know, if EnviroFlight had responded to the calls, what would that conversation have been like? Part of what, in one of the exhibits, you know, it lists the number of jobs that might go away compared to the number of jobs that might be leaving, you know, but you want to compare the actual payroll of the jobs that might be leaving compared to those, et cetera, et cetera. You know, so as a citizen, I might have those concerns. But as a council person, you know, I'm being asked to address, you know, the zoning. And so, having said that, like I said, I don't want it to be lost on the public. You know, that we might have some of the same concerns as citizens, you know, but where it comes down to doing the job that you asked us to do, you know, there sometimes does have to be a separation. And I'm not saying, you know, it's not a matter of a right or wrong type decision. It's a matter of trusting that appropriate efforts were done before it got to this point. And so a lot of work was done, a lot of discussions and considerations and negotiations happened, and now this is where we are. So there were opportunities, there were exit ramps, you know, for some other decisions to be made, you know, but we can't take responsibility for those. So, like I said, it's sometimes tough, but this is why we're here, to do what sometimes is a hard job. But we will do our best.
Okay. Lisa, were you going to say something?
Well, I think the recommendations from the Planning Commission are clear.
Yes.
And, you know, having read the packet and also really listening to the concerns by community members that live right around that area, I see in those recommendations significant specific expectations involving analyzing traffic safety and additional infrastructure and noise impact and stormwater impact. And I also appreciate the recommendation about mitigation screening. You know, I'm of the perspective that this is a cool project for our community. And I think that it it does take somewhat of a leap of faith to say, how can we figure out how to make it work the best for most? But, so that's why I appreciate the balance of what Planning Commission is recommending, and I have trust in Yamamoto Molinas that their word is good, and that they want to become a part of the community and bring some vibrant energy to this property. I think it's a shame about EnviroFlight in that it started small, it grew big, they moved away. They didn't go to like CBE land or anything, for example, but, can't hold that against them. I wish there was an alternate space for them in Yellow Springs if they are not going to be at Millworks anymore, but I don't know whether there is or not. But I was under the understanding that they pretty much moving away for the primary part of their business anyway, and that was a choice that they made prior to this development being proposed. But perhaps I'm incorrect on that. That was my understanding.
Kaneda?
So I also think that there's a great need for innovation at Millworks. But I can't ignore the concerns that have come up. And I know that it's tough because we're not in a position to say, well, you should try to keep the tenants that you have. But it's hard for me to overlook the impact of EnviroFlight leaving and just thinking about how, in comparison to a place like Dayton, if we did like a job for job impact loss, in Dayton, that'd be on the first page of Dayton Daily News that like 660 jobs were leaving. If we compare the 22 jobs with our population to the jobs that would be in the population of Dayton. So, and I'm not saying that that's because of anyone or anything, but it is a huge impact, not just because of the utilities that they pay. So looking at that $300,000 in utilities, if that same amount is not paid by the tenants that come in, we will feel that. But like I said, that's not something that we can change. So I want to acknowledge that. And I want to acknowledge the fact that we had people from EnviroFlight come up and say, this is going to impact us. It will be interesting to see where they go and the community that they impact when they move. So I just think that there's a lot to ask. And I don't know if this is the forum where we ask about the affordable housing pieces, the net of gain of jobs that are coming in from this. I feel like we have the ability to ask those questions and kind of ask about what the budget looks like and things. I feel like that's something that we can also weigh.
Sure. And I will definitely say, once it comes to council, it becomes a policy decision. And so, we do have to think about, especially with a PUD, why we might, want something like this to happen in our community.
Mm-hmm.
So you're absolutely right to think about those things. Mary Ann?
Yeah, well, I'm on Planning Commission, so I was clearly at that meeting, and it gave me pause when I understood that the impact on EnviroFlight in particular, because I had been assuming, oh, they're growing, so it's going to mean more businesses. It did not occur to me that it would also impact the potential of EnviroFlight being lost. And as has been said, council can't do anything about that, and whether or not we did anything with the PUD, the current owners could still not renew the lease, so that's not up to us, but it did set me back. I also have talked to people who are involved in, well, I've talked to the previous owners, I've talked to the previous owner of EnviroFlight, and I've read all the material in this packet, and I've talked to a couple other people too, so I've had chance to be thinking about it more. So the issues, the safety issue on the traffic issue, I do think can be resolved, and I appreciate the inclusion that Ted, I assume, put in the packet of showing sidewalks where there could be parking. Anyway, I appreciated the attention to that, as well as the information from the new owners that they presented in this packet. The concern about drunk people presumably coming from the brewery, that needs to be handled, and I would think that the brewery has a responsibility in that. I don't know what to say about that, but that I wouldn't want that happening in my backyard. At the same time, this district is zoned currently I-1, correct? I-1. So anyone who is living beside it has to understand that it's not residential. It never has been residential. So that's sort of like, you have to sort of weigh, okay, you've chosen to live beside a place that's going to have businesses in it. That's a choice you made. I think the drainage can be handled. I'm not concerned about that. The environment flight issue and the distillery, I know enough that I know there's more than one story about what happened, and I also wasn't aware that the lease is for 2 more years, I think. So, and presumably Environ Flight is a pretty large company, I gather, so that if they did want to stay, there are some other places, even at Antioch College perhaps, where they could be. I was also concerned when the concept of an entertainment center was mentioned, because that sort of describes what this place, well, entertainment center might not be the right word, but a lot more will be going on there, and it will presumably impact the people that live around there. Never mind. And when I left the Planning Commission, I was concerned that the new owners hadn't seemed to have reached out to existing, especially nonprofits, that were already working on the kind of things they were talking about. I was very happy to see that it seems like that's being done, but that did give me pause, because it made me think, okay, you haven't reached out into the community, and yet you have all these plans. Are you really going to be grounded in the community when you try and do these things? So I was sort of concerned. I think that that's changing, and I appreciate that, so.
Thank you. Okay, I'll say a few things, and then I think we will vote on this first piece. So the first thing is, I agree with Marianne. There are different stories about the alleged 2 businesses that are being displaced. I think, honestly, the current owners of Millworks responded to that very clearly and transparently. And I believe that, there is a movement, especially with EnviroFlight, to Kentucky. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But honestly, we do have a better place, which is what we currently call the Center for Business and Education. So there is room for businesses to expand there. And I also appreciate that it's great to have a business, but we also have to weigh the idea of jobs and, how businesses develop and support our community. But that being said, I'm also not sure that that's really what council should be making decisions about, sort of cherry picking what are the best businesses and that sort of thing. I also agree with what I've heard, and what Johnny confirmed is that if anything, this is an opportunity to solve stormwater problems, and those will be addressed. We will not ever commit to any kind of project without there being stormwater solutions. That's just the way the village operates right now. I also have to say that, if you look at what's being done, by opening up spaces, you also mitigate some of those stormwater issues. We're looking at artist live workspaces. We're not paving the whole thing. So I think those things are going to be balanced. But anyway, that is something that is being contemplated. And I guess the last issue is, I mean, honestly, I believe that the brewery does a very good job of handling people that, might want to have one too many. Having been there myself, I think they they handle that well. But beyond that, we're not talking about adding anything into this area that's going to increase that kind of issue. We're talking about science castles for kids. We're talking about artist stuff. And I also think the hostel thing is brilliant. I mean, honestly, we need to have a place for people that, are using the bike path or whatever to be able to stay, and they can't afford the hotel or a B&B. So I think that's in line with our village values. So I guess the concerns I've heard are not enough for me to go against the recommendations of the Planning Commission for everything else except for D. So with that, I'm going to make a motion that we approve or we accept the recommendations from Planning Commission for everything else except for 1254.06D.
Second.
Okay? Should we do a roll call on this? Is that that's probably the best, right?
Makes sense to Stokes. Krieger.
Yes.
Sanford.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. Okay. So now we are going to talk about 1254.06D, and I want to read the language, okay, which is that it must be the case to approve this that the proposed project will be consistent with the public health, safety, and welfare needs of the village. Okay. So, Kanetta, you kind of jumped up. Did you want to?
Oh, I'm scooting up, but.
Okay.
You gotta know when not to
say
scoop.
something about that?
Well, I will say that I watched the Planning Commission twice to kind of review that piece. And it seemed like it keyed in on the welfare part of the village. And from my notes that I took, I really felt like that the things that are specifically addressed there when it comes to the safety issues, I think that those are things that will be handled. Like I said, I'm coming back to the piece about looking at the incoming businesses and kind of seeing, economic development wise, if we have a net gain there. And it's not just about one person or 22 people having to leave their jobs here, but I'm also thinking about the dollar amount. I'm thinking about, are we going to have the payroll tax amount that we currently have? Are we going to have the people paying the amount in utilities that we currently have? Because of how small we are, there will be an impact if that's not the same. And I am personally not seeing it in the documents that we have, like a pro forma or something like that to show, what the expectation is. That's what I have.
Okay. Lisa, did you want to make any comments on this?
I mean, I feel like, that's linked in, this concern about safety is linked in with, pedestrian safety. I think we've addressed that. I do appreciate that map that shows pedestrian access. And what I'm hearing from the discussion is that the types of businesses that are coming in are not likely to increase crime. So I think that's the other aspect of D. And it seems to me that the noise factor is not all just at night. It's all not just nightlife stuff. So it seems like both the traffic and the associated noise is somewhat spread across the day and across the week. So at this point, having seen the additional attachments in the packet, I don't really understand why that was identified as a concern.
Okay. Kevin?
Well, I would also say that perhaps at first glance, I wouldn't understand why it was concerned, but I do appreciate the fact that it did give the opportunity for the owners and the architect to put forth Exhibits 1 and 2 that provided a lot of information that we might not have had otherwise. And I think it did bring about some additional considerations, maybe some concerns that might have been overlooked that now are being addressed in a more discreet manner. So again, I think given the concerns that were raised, regardless of how valid the concerns were, the fact that I think an admirable job was done with the addition of the exhibits by, again, the owners and the architect to address them, I don't have any concerns about the issues being raised, or I think I'm satisfied with the degree to which they're being addressed. And I think they've gone above and beyond what would have been the minimal requirements for passage. So I'm comfortable with with the plans as they exist.
Okay, Mary Ann?
Anytime there's change, people get afraid, especially land use, there's fear. Frequently, the fear is unfounded, but it's there. Clearly, there will be change, and it'll have some impact on in particular, the neighbors. But I'm okay. I'm okay with D. I mean, I recognize their trade-offs, so.
I may have more to say, but I do want to point out two things. One is 2 access points add to safety. So I appreciate that that's a part of this project, particularly with fire. And secondly, we have the busiest part of the bike path, period. So signage may be something that we need to think more about. And that's something that we can make Greene County Parks and Trails pay for, by the way. So, but I may have some more comments, but before we get to that, any comments from citizens? And I know, Melissa, you had some things to say about this part?
I'll wait till other people have other things to say.
Okay, or you can come on up.
So I think that you're underestimating the volume of traffic that's going to go up and down Walnut Street. And we know because we take that path daily, and especially on the weekends. I do really hope that you will do a traffic impact study, because that's really the only way that you're going to get an idea for the high volume times of the year. When we have good weather, you see what happens to the downtown and how many people. Think about the brewery expanding by 1/3, another distillery there. You've got, even though you have people coming in on Walnut Street, they're also coming in and out on Fairfield. Fairfield is a 2-lane street. It goes to 1 under the underpass. 2-lane, 1 lane under the underpass. So you've got traffic that's just bottlenecked. So I'll just read what I wrote. An impact study must be done in order to address the safety of pedestrians, cyclists, and cars on the bike path, Walnut Street and Fairfield. Although Ted Donnell mentioned at the zoning and planning meeting that customers would primarily take the bike path is not a thoroughfare. That's not the purpose of the bike path. Its main purpose is recreational, and we'd like to keep it that way. Walnut Street already is very congested with parking on both sides and a sidewalk that only extends to the entry of Millworks on just one side. There are currently no sidewalks that extend to Fairfield on the Walnut side. Fairfield is congested as well, and like I said, there are no sidewalks for pedestrians to take on Fairfield. And like I said, the 2 lanes go to a single underpass bridge and then back out to 2 lanes. So it's bottleneck. But I do think that you really need to look at when we have good weather and when there's a lot of people in the village, especially Friday through Sunday evening, the volume of people going in and out around Walnut and Fairfield. But let's keep the bike path recreational.
Thanks, Melissa. Yes, Richard?
Richard Lapidus. I both walk and drive Walnut Street almost every single day, one or the other, depending on the weather. And it is certainly true that it's a problem, and I don't think that's subtle. Parking on both sides narrows the street. There's a hill, like an upslope, as you pass down Walnut Street toward the millworks. And regardless of which direction you're traveling in, at a certain point, you're blinded by the headlights of the oncoming traffic. And I've heard many people comment of it. It's not, again, not subtle at all. I think it's a chance to straighten out Walnut Street, and I don't think that's complicated. There are a lot of ways to do it, I'm sure. Regarding the Fairfield, obviously, there's a sidewalk issue getting beyond the brewery onto Fairfield. It makes the proposed animating the second entrance, the back entrance, I call it, to the millworks. It makes that less useful, much less useful. And I know that the new owners are proposing to enhance it, but that doesn't solve the problem that Melissa also mentioned, which is it's barely, I think her words were choke point. And we all know that, but to fix that is a big deal. And all things that Melissa talked about, that I'm talking about, actually are about village issues. The PUD only addresses the internal responsibilities of the owners who have proposed it. They really don't have to be or aren't responsible for the condition of our streets. And that's a contingent sort of liability that lies within expanding the use of the millworks, contingent liability for the village. A lot of proposals have been made, like the architects here, to help solve those problems. But in the end, it'll be an issue of who's paying for them. The other point I'd make is that regarding noise, the architect and the new owners are proposing what they call a living wall, which is not a fence that's just a physical barrier. It's also a way to attenuate noise. And it's pretty effective. They're used all over Europe. I've seen them in many countries. And there are many versions of them. And they all involve using foliage along with the physical, with steel, for example, to really dampen down all that, what some might think was raucous. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Other comments? Yes.
My name's Michelle Burns. I just want to support Melissa's comments about particularly Fairfield Pike. If you could really look into that traffic study, I think it would be good. There are I understand that my section of Fairfield Pike is not within your jurisdiction, and I've been in constant communication with the township about it, but there are no speed limit signs from US 68 to the bridge. There are semis that currently think that that's a shortcut to Fairborn, and so they end up backing up onto Cemetery Street to turn back out to 68, or they back all the way back up to 68 and turn around. And I have pictures of that. And we had signs posted on 68 for that, and that's not helping. So just to say, you've got a lot of issues going on in that area that are just, need to be addressed. So I really do suggest that you look at a traffic study for that area and Walnut Street. I currently don't let my kids walk to school because of the one-lane bridge and the traffic congestion there. So, I know you all think it's not bad, but just come on a really nice Saturday when it's June, July, August, and you'll see what we're talking about. I know it's not a problem right now, but it's not that time of year. So
Yeah.
come on back in the summer.
I volunteer for street fair, so I know
Right,
a
and-
little bit about the issues.
Well,
so,
and
yeah.
that brings me up to, not that this is a street fair issue, but on street fair, they have to block the cemetery off.
Right.
Because people do park on gravestones. I've taken pictures of that as well. I mean, I don't want to seem obsessive that that's what I do, but, it's really disrespectful where people will park when not given adequate parking. And they will park along the cemetery with their bumpers on the headstones, so. just keep that in mind. Thanks.
Were you going to say something? Amelia?
Yeah, is the village responsible for Fairfield all the way, I mean, for signage and?
Well, I think
street or-
Michelle was just mentioning it's out of our jurisdiction, but could we collaborate with the township on that? Sure. And I think that sounds like a signage issue to me in some ways, right? I mean, that we can address. So I
Lack of
appreciate the traffic
sidewalk
study. Yeah.
issue.
Right.
Which is,
Yep. Yes, Michael.
I have a comment that's technically out of order, and I apologize.
As long as you apologize in advance.
What you said at the end of the last segment of discussion was you thought this was a cool project. I agree. I'd go a step further. We know that we're familiar with the term synergy, and this is a word that was introduced into the language by Buckminster Fuller, who described synergy as the phenomenon when the whole becomes more than the sum of its parts. So 1 + 1 is no longer 2, it's 3 or 4 or 5. Okay, and the next step is this is still going to be an incubator. It's an incubator now for budding businesses. It will be just another kind of incubator. The difference is that the enterprises that are at Millworks, and I've been a tenant at Millworks along with Richard for 20 years, is that there's not much interaction between the various enterprises, a little bit from time to time. But this project will bring artists and interested people together in a dynamic way. It said, I read someplace, somebody was asking a jazz musician, what's swing, you know? And he said, if you got to ask, you don't have it. And this project has the potential to have it. And that's another way of saying it's really cool. And it's one of the things that can be one of the things that is part of the large panoply of items that are imbued with je ne sais quoi that Yellow Springs has. They can't describe it, but it's an ongoing attraction, okay? And it leads to a lot of traffic.
Thanks, Michael. Any other comments? John.
John Hudson. I do support the overall project. I second Michael, but I also second everybody else. So my issue is, again, on the village's shoulders in terms of how to deal with the Fairfield where the bridge is. After 30 years of being there, I've seen that the traffic is very fast, going both ways, down the hill and down Michelle's Hill too. So if that exit entrance there to the Millworks has a lot more traffic, that could potentially be a serious problem for accidents for various reasons. And I would reiterate my issues with the situation of Walnut being a problem both for speed and parking and pedestrians. Richard mentioned the hill. Somehow it's gotten built up. It needs to be cut down about 18 inches, that hill part. There's about 200, maybe 300 feet there that needs to be cut down, and that would ameliorate the hill aspect and allow for proper curbs to be put in place, which you can't do now because the road's way above the curb area, the sidewalks. And so that's something the village needs to deal with. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, John. Any other comments? Larry?
Yeah, Larry Gerthofer. So,
Netta?
Canada, Sanford. I really like your cost-benefit analysis aspect. I mean, this is the only end. All the rest of you are cheerleaders. And I'm afraid. Okay, I am afraid. So, if you all can step back a minute and come up with a bill, I mean, you know, the project, yeah, it's great. Can we afford it? I mean, we could sell a cell tower. Or, I'm thinking, this project's going to be 3.5 cell towers, if not 6. I mean, there's a lot of work involved here. But I would like to see more of that kind of thinking. I mean, cheerleading is good, conceptualness is good, but where are all these cars going? How much off-street parking? Is that in the packet? So, things like that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Larry. Any other comments? Yes, Amy.
So I'm Amy Magnus. I live down in Brookside. One of the investments that I am hoping to make with this new opportunity is to introduce our young people to small-scale manufacturing. And it's through this opportunity that, you know, that we can incubate and accelerate value within our community. So our cost-benefit analysis, our return on investment, I see in involving more of our young people and simply giving them someplace to go in the winter. You know, this is the investment that I hope to make with this project. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Amy. Any other comments? Okay, yes, please.
Hi, my name is Zamir, and I am a future Yellow Spring resident. Because this project is so cool, I'm founder of a couple of nonprofit in New York. One of them is called Hunger Van. What we are doing with Hunger Van, we are engaging young people to do good. We are engaging good people to do good. And we are going to move Hunger Van headquarters here on this property with the kitchen they are building. So, you know, change happens. And I heard this like 30 years ago. You know, all these little issues here and there can be solved. The change is happening. Let's give the ownership to the young generation. Let them move us forward. Our generation has contributed. If I look at this stage, it's mostly my generation people. So let's hand over to the young generation. They have new ideas, and they have the ideas our generation does not even understand. It's a different world. It's a Facebook and Instagram, and there are new approaches to do things. And I'm really glad that this is a cool project. We are going to move the Hunger Van headquarters from New Jersey to this property. And we are going to, I'm working with Pastor Rick, and we are going to work with young people in Springfield with the court system, the young people who are in trouble. We are going to engage them with regular kids. She has a project called Kid Scout, and we will bring them together. We will have them put together food for the people who, and it's a big big issue which nobody talks about. There is a big hunger issue at colleges, at the young community, senior communities. And we are going to bring all those issues on the table, get the young people involved, because it's not that we don't have resources. We have a lot of resources. It's not that we are living in silos. So we are going to merge with Pastor Rick. We are going to bring 6 churches together and have them work together on the social issues. So this is a cool project. I'm glad that I'm going to be moving it here. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Amir, and welcome to Yellow Springs. Any other comments? Yes.
I'm wondering, I mean, I don't think anyone, on council anyway, is saying we think this is a bad project. And at the same time, we're listening especially to neighbors who are concerned about primarily vehicular traffic, I guess. I don't know if it's appropriate, given that we're asking the young generation, as Amir said, to step up, whether it's appropriate to ask Antonio or Jessica if they've thought about the traffic issue and if they have any ideas about that. At least I guess I could invite them to do so.
Ted is here.
And I do, as I said, I appreciate, I assume it was Ted who did the drawings about the traffic, and also appreciate when you start squeezing traffic, it slows it down.
Well, it seems like Ted would be the best person to speak to that.
Okay. Fix it. Ted Donnell. We have a lot of conversations in the village about smart growth, new urbanism, all of the things that create character to a community. Part of that character when it comes to traffic is reinforcing the pedestrian above all other things, making truck traffic next to impossible because it reinforces pedestrian traffic, making it difficult to find a place to park and drive fast. And so the mechanisms that are being employed through even like Rails to Trails is to come up with ways to actually slow traffic as much as possible. And if you do go on Walnut from the stoplight toward Millworks, that very congested area as you start is very slow because it is so narrow that you don't have a choice but to slow down. That slow pace of traffic is safer than a wider boulevard with less cars, and that's where the traffic really goes quickly. And I would suggest that we condense that whole path down Walnut, excuse me, I got something in my throat, all the way to Fairfield. As far as the bridge goes, if we didn't have a bridge there that restricted traffic, we would be talking about putting in some kind of a speed bump. The bridge is a speed bump. It forces people to slow down. It forces people to pay attention. It forces people to go at a pace that is unnatural in a car, down to a pace where it's pedestrian oriented. But for that bridge, those semis would go past the sign all the way down Fairfield without stopping. So with that.
But do you have, I mean, I heard from Michelle that they slow down at the bridge, but when they go past her house, they're not. Do you have suggestions for the other part of,
Well, I think as a whole, of the village as a whole, we want to start to talk about traffic calming. We want to talk about the treatment of the roads, width of the roads, bioswales, introducing bioswales as a stormwater management tool. All those things that come into play, the rails, the trails, the bike stuff, the safe routes to school is a step. There's many more steps down that same road that are all combined, but that really create that atmosphere. And it goes back again to highlighting the pedestrian and looking for ways to highlight that pedestrian.
And we do have our complete streets policy.
Right,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
yeah, well, Fairfield's not a great complete street, I guess.
Right.
If my kids were on there, I probably.
Well, I mean, so I guess I want to say a few things, and then I think we're moving towards a vote. I mean, first of all, I guess I want to take issue, Larry, with the idea that other council members aren't thinking about the practicalities. I think we all definitely are, and I think it's why we like the recommendation around a traffic study. That being said, I mean, I want to point out some realities. I mean, we are already dealing with traffic to a vibrant brewery, and I agree with what Ted said. I mean, the fact that Walnut's fairly narrow does slow you down, all right? Doesn't mean we can't do better treatments, but, you know, we can definitely think about that. I do think the Fairfield issue is one that's more relevant, all right? And so I appreciate Michelle and others bringing that up. And again, I mean, there are signage treatments that, I mean, our PD has already done a great job with the flashing signs. I mean, those flashing signs make people slow down. So more of that kind of treatment makes a lot of sense to me. And so I will say, you know, I'm passing, or, you know, my decision on this is going to be based on some of those conditions, all right? And so I think that those are good concerns, those are relevant and appropriate concerns, but they're not things that we can't deal with. And so I agree, you know, the village has to be part of the solution, and we have to work with the new owners of Millworks to address those things. But the Fairfield piece is definitely a new element, but the Walnut thing is not a new element, all right? I mean, people are going to the brewery all the time, and as was already pointed out, we're talking about activities throughout the day. We're not talking about everything happening in one particular time. Crosswalk, awesome idea. I mean, those things we definitely need to think about. The other thing that, well, actually, that was the main thing that I thought came out of this. And so what I guess I will say finally is, I have not heard anything that allows me to vote no for the PUD based on subpoint D, all right? If we're looking at safety, which is being addressed by the recommendations, if we're looking at welfare, I mean, this is definitely in the welfare of our community. And if we're looking at community health, I think this is also in line with that. So I cannot see a reason to not say yes to this PUD based on that standard. Okay. Council, any other comments before we vote?
This is fanciful probably, but Fairfield, when I was in Scotland, they have a lot of one-way roads, and then every, I don't know, 100 feet or something, you pull off. So perhaps Fairfield could be, I mean, one lane, people going both lanes. That would really slow things down, and just make it one lane, and every 100 feet or something, you can pull off and let someone go through. And that probably...
In regards to the
Something
traffic,
to think
I did read an article not long ago from Strong Towns, which is a nonprofit based or a website, and they talked about what creates slower traffic, and it is the narrow roads and also the greenery. So thinking about, I live on Dayton Street at the part where it's 35 miles per hour. It might as well be 45 to some people. And in the wintertime when it's really dead, it is a lot faster because there's nothing slowing people down in their periphery. So that's another thing too, is using greenery to slow people down too.
Yep. Yeah. And that's part of our active transportation plan. I mean, we need to implement those recommendations. Lisa, Kevin, anything else?
I'm good. Ready to move forward.
Okay, so I will make the motion that we say that 1254.06D is satisfied in this application.
Brian, you want to go ahead and read the conditions? I think that's important because there were a lot of comments about the conditions.
Well, we will talk about that.
Okay.
That'll be our last step.
Okay.
But I guess we still need to decide because this D is the reason that Planning Commission did not approve it.
Okay.
Okay, I second that.
Okay, let's do a roll call again, please, Judy?
Yes. Sanford,
Yes.
Krieger,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Tausch.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about the 5 conditions. Kevin, did you want to say anything in particular about those?
No, I just want to make sure that they were addressed. It was sort of interesting to me that we were asked to pass it and then say, well, we'll do these things, because I know we don't have time to do them all before passing. But we're just for the sake of the public, and there were several comments made rightly so that were spoken to by these conditions. Things like the traffic study and the sound barriers and whatnot. So again, I just want to make sure that that was highlighted and folks were fully aware of that.
Yeah, and actually, Denise, do you want to come back up and just run through the conditions for us, just so we've got those highlighted?
Yeah, I was going to also say that staff is also suggesting a 6th one, which is no retail shops or stores.
Right.
So removing the 30% of retail incidental to the manufacturing or production of goods on the premises, getting a broader understanding of traffic safety impacts with any potential need for cost of infrastructure required to resolve these, allow for a deviation to the number of parking spaces with the justification that the total number of spaces will be rarely used at the same time due to the varied hours of operation, and they are planning on 140 parking spaces and an additional 40 bike racks. A noise impact analysis, they did address that, a stormwater impact analysis, and this would be based on when they submit their site plan, what portion of the property is going to actually be impervious, and then based on that, we will hire our own engineer as well to look at what they're calculating for stormwater runoff to make sure that we agree with what they're saying. And then the agreement regarding the 3 residential lots as affordable rentals. Again, that would be a condition of approval, and that would be put into the final plan. We will have an actual agreement as part of the PUD that will be vetted by legal that adds all of this in there. And then again, no retail shops or stores.
Okay.
Can I just,
Yes.
just for clarity's sake, just a little housekeeping on my part. If you don't mind breaking those into numbers 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So each one is separate. Noise analysis, stormwater impact analysis, agreement regarding, those are all very different activities done by very different entities. So and I'll just write it up that way if you're in agreement with separating them out that way.
Yeah. Agree.
Yes. Thanks, Denise. Any questions or comments about the recommendations?
I just, for the affordable rentals, I just want to make sure that it's per the zoning code, so the 80%. And then looking at it, are they going to be permanently affordable, or is there a time limit for how affordable they will be?
Somewhere it did say they were.
Yeah, I don't think that they answered those
I
questions
thought it
during the planning commission. So if those are questions that you want answered, then that.
I think what this is more of, we now have the purview to add to that recommendation. So if you're suggesting that that should include permanently affordable.
Yeah, in the zoning code, it has permanently affordable, so I think that that's something that makes sense to me, is that if they're getting the PUD for it, then they should be permanently affordable.
Okay.
And then perhaps adding a caveat, as long as that is in fact housing space. Maybe
Yeah.
that could change into something completely different, but.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else about the recommendations? Okay, any other questions or comments from citizens? Okay, so then, I think we want to pass what, Judy, I think we're talking about 8 recommendations ultimately?
Correct.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve these recommendations from Planning Commission.
I move that we approve the recommendations from Planning Commission and also the 6th recommendation from staff regarding no retail.
Okay,
Second.
Okay, and then I guess we're saying as amended, right, with permanently affordable? Okay,
And broken into 8 elements instead of,
yes.
so as amended.
Okay, let's do a roll call on that as well, Judy.
Yes. Stokes.
Yes.
Sanford.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. Okay. Chris, is there anything that we did not do?
Just to clarify,
Legally?
the next step is then to move forward, there'll be an ordinance to rezone PUD.
Okay, all right. So that's what will come next at our March 18th meeting. Will be a ordinance to rezone as a PUD. All right, great. All right, thanks, everyone. Feel free to stay around for the manager's report, but otherwise, remember, we have to keep the door open, so take conversations downstairs. Thank you. And I believe, is that where we're at next, the
Yeah.
manager's report?
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
I'm out of town, sorry. Thanks for the invite, though.
Yeah.
They didn't get the
Sounds
message. Take those.
Uh-huh.
Who do you trust?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thursday?
I mean, to me,
I can't come, I have a meeting.
I'm at Home Inc. right now as their AmeriCorps Vista.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah.
Can I get back with you? I'm not sure of my
Absolutely.
schedule. I think, keep going down the list and see what you hit. No.
the what?
Okay.
Huh.
Good night.
All right, are we ready?
Yeah, I can do that.
All right, thanks.
All right,
Malta, just let you know, I have HRC, so it's a hard no. Okay.
all right.
Seven, thank you.
So,
All right.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right.
manager's
The
report.
7th.
okay, so I'm just going to mention a couple of quick things. Thank you, Denise.
Thanks, Denise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Utility Roundup had 3 requests for assistance in February. We did fund all 3 of those requests to the maximum of $200. The police department is scheduled for their second mandatory scenario-based training on March 20th. There was a letter submitted recently by a citizen about darkness is worth protecting and concerns about light pollution, and I was asked to put into my report the current provisions in the zoning code that have to do with light pollution and how we control it. Those are in there. My recommendation would be that if council would like to look at potentially more regulations about light pollution, that we refer that back to the Planning Commission as part of their review. So that would be my thought. I mean, we do have regulations about it, but it can be a concern, and I myself am concerned about it sometimes, not necessarily in the village, but what we have seems to be working okay for now. Could it be better? Well, sure, it can always be better. So,
And that's the point, though. I mean, can it be better? I mean, are there things that we know we can do?
I am sure that there are newer things out there that could be applied, newer thoughts, newer ways to think about controlling light. Ours have to do primarily, our regulations have to do primarily with lighted signs and, searchlights and things like that. It was obviously a concern with Cresco. They do have the nightshade on the roof. So, I don't think that there's any harm in asking Planning Commission to revisit it when they review the code in the future, but it's not something that I see as an urgent matter.
So it was I who brought this up, I think, after thinking about a letter from Curlis some time back, and I've been following this International Dark Sky Association. So, I mean, we're not ever probably going to be able to qualify as a dark sky location because of our proximity to the base.
Right, right.
That alone is just going to, it's going to be a certain factor. But I mean, I think it would be, if it's not too arduous to add it, I was going to say I would do research, but I agree, planning commission might do it. It may have to do with the kind of bulbs that are used and
Yeah.
things like that, so that when it is dark, we do have, we can see the stars.
Yeah, as a person who's, you know, worked in wilderness areas and things like that, I'm all about darkness and you can really see the sky and it's a whole different ballgame. So I personally think it's worth referring back to Planning Commission to review when they get to that part of the code.
This would be for on village-owned land, is that what?
It
plus
would be
regulations?
within the village zoning code as a regulation, zoning and planning codes.
So it wouldn't just apply to our streetlights
No.
and stuff, it would apply to
No, it would apply to
lighting and
businesses.
businesses and homes.
And if they're interested in looking at the International Dark Sky Association, there's articles about light pollution effects on wildlife and ecosystems. And I mean, it's not just because it's nice to look at stars, you know, there's a lot of, so, yeah, thank you, Patty, for looking into that.
So by the way, since we mentioned the comp plan update, have we talked to NVRPC as part of that initiative?
I don't think that we have, but Mary Ann can maybe answer better. They've just started the comprehensive plan review in the Planning Commission.
I don't know.
Okay, so I want to make sure, because,
Judy, do you?
It's the topic for Monday's meeting. We talked about getting an RFP.
okay, so we definitely need to talk to NVRPC. They help Bellbrook with theirs, they are working on the counties, so we should just have them in the loop.
Yeah, we know about, yes, MVRPCs, we're in that loop, and that's part of the larger conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess ultimately, this makes me think I'd like the plan for how we're gonna do the comp update brought back to council. Because in particular, what could be nice about working with MVRPC is that it will like slide nicely into the county comp plan. So I'm not saying we have to go that route, but I just want to make sure we think about it.
And that's pretty much all I had in my report.
Okay, Judy?
You've got some changes that I made based on suggestions from you folks to council rules and procedures, just for your, I mean, if you want to take a look at them and see if you agree, I can bring legislation back if you do in fact want those changes made. Just specifically, Robert's Rules of Orders covers some of these things, but it doesn't call them out specifically. So this just sort of says, in consideration of citizens speaking on any aspect of a matter, no clapping, verbal approval or disapproval or display of signs would be permitted in council chambers. So that's the addition there. And then I changed, based on a suggestion, the order of your agenda, which can only be changed legislatively. Otherwise, you have to make a motion each time you have a meeting to change that order. So if you want to give me feedback just over email as to your thoughts about that, I can either bring legislation or it'll come back as a discussion for the next meeting, based on what I hear back from you.
Can I just add something now?
Yeah?
So I appreciate, and I'm sure the guests have appreciated this, but I know twice recently Lisa's had,
I gotta stand up.
no, oh, okay, you're standing up for something else.
My back.
You know, like we have special reports. Maybe this is, I'm just trying to make sure, all right, so never mind, I found it.
So that got moved ahead of citizen
Okay,
concern.
okay, all right.
So that was one of the, like, because otherwise we have to do that at the beginning of the meeting. But I'm comfortable with that move.
Right, right.
Like, I think it's respectful of the guests that we, bring for special reports.
Understood.
And then, as Judy said, the other major change is the no clapping, sign waving thing.
Right.
So,
And there was one other, and that was that you folks always seem to want your executive session up front. So I just moved it there.
Yeah. So yeah, I think let's bring it to the next meeting unless anyone has any. Okay,
All right,
great.
will do.
Thanks, Judy.
Oh, that and just, the dang word search works now on eGov. Has been
Wow.
for 5 years,
That
so
was
just
exciting news.
go there
yeah.
and do that.
Okay, and then, I guess the last thing is future agenda items. So, anything we need to talk about there?
So your ordinance.
And Kevin wanted to add HRC's annual report to the March 18th
Good.
meeting.
Even though I will not be here.
Oh,
And
that's
who's
right.
presenting? Jessica or Tim?
Someone, probably Tim. I was gonna
Tim.
say someone from HRC.
Say.
And Patty, that, I brought up that holiday swap thing.
Yes.
Is that something that you would want to talk to staff about and
It's,
see?
I already did, and I'm sorry, it's in my report.
It was in the report, yeah.
It's, staff is not in favor of it.
They're not in favor, so
No,
we can take
because
that
it-
off of here.
Yeah, because it affects too many,
Yeah.
like kids out of school
Yeah,
days.
I got it.
And we do already, just for clarification, we do already give time off to go vote.
Thanks.
Sorry, Lisa, I kind of skipped that.
No, that's fine.
Yep.
I just didn't know if there was more to talk about it, so that's good.
And then I don't think it's an agenda item, but maybe an update about the, whatchamacallit, Sandy's horse
The
thing.
hitching post?
Oh,
Hitching post,
was that not in, I'm sorry, I thought I put that in there,
Not
but
in- it
I
wasn't in
did, I
this
did not then,
report.
okay. Yes.
But it could be in the next one.
I would think we would have a report about, for the police assessment.
Yes.
Yep.
PD assessment.
We'll definitely, yep, we've got the other things on there.
Will that be a recommendation or just a report out? Recommendation in terms of the consultant?
I don't know at this point. We'll know
We'll know after Friday.
Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll know.
Okay.
Cool. Anything else?
Just want to give some special recognition to the only citizen that stayed.
See, there you go. All right, well.
Oh,
and-
I'm sorry, I have one more thing.
Yes.
I would like to add the presentation of a commendation for Officer Raful for his response at the shooting incident. This was something that the chief and I had discussed, but it was also actually suggested by hearing Officer Jeff Hazlett, because he felt like Officer Raful's response deserved recognition. So I would like to add that to the next meeting at the beginning, so he can maybe have his family.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Okay, so with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thanks, everyone.
You like screamed into the microphone.
I will entertain, I move.